Okay, hello everybody, hello members and people in the room with us tonight and people joining us online. Thank you for being with us for this meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Board. I'm Councillor Kate Salmon and I am in the chair for this meeting. And firstly, I'm going to hand over to the Democratic Services Officer to read out the housekeeping notice.
Thank you, Chair. Please note that this meeting is being recorded by the Council for live broadcast and will be published on the Council website for a minimum of 6 months. The meeting may also be recorded or streamed for live or subsequent broadcast by members of the public. For those in the room, please note that if the fire alarm sounds, please exit the building by way of the nearest available signed fire exit route and make your way to the assembly point in the car park at the front of the building. Finally, please could everyone ensure that background noise is kept to a minimum and that mobile phones or other devices are turned off or switched to a silent setting for the duration of the meeting. For those in the room, this includes turning off microphones and turning the volume down completely on laptops. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I'll move to agenda item 1, which is apologies, and I'll ask the clerk to let us know if there have been any apologies for this meeting.
I've no apologies for this meeting, Chair, but Councillor Felicity Rice has advised that she's joining the meeting online.
Okay, Councillor Beasley.
Thank you, Chair. Just to advise that Councillor Broadhead will be here. He's on his way, but he's been delayed.
Okay, thank you very much. Moving on then to substitute members. Can the clerk confirm? No, there have been no apologies, so there won't be any substitute members. Sorry, I've answered my own question. Moving on to item 3, which is declarations of interest. So do any councillors here have any disclosable pecuniary interests or any other interests on any items on the agenda that they need to declare, please? Nope, I'm not seeing anybody indicating.
I think I might do something.
Go ahead, Councillor Aikenhead.
That's the right one. Sorry. I just wanted to mention there is an item on the agenda later on about the leisure services presentation. First of all, I am the council's representative on an organisation called Sport Pool, whose members use the leisure centres extensively. My husband and I also run an Aikido club, but it's a not-for-profit organisation, so there's no pecuniary interest. But I thought I should let the committee know that I have that I do that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Aikenhead. Okay, moving on then to item 4, which is confirmation of the minutes of the last meeting. Could I seek assent that the minutes are a correct record of our last meeting? Any dissension from that? Okay, that's fine, thank you. So then we have the action sheet at item 4A. So the first item on there, 103A, which goes back a few months now. It was an item for the chair to follow up on something. It's been on there since the previous chair's time. I have communicated with Councillor Bartlett about it and he has advised that that one can be removed. So that's that one. Item 106, which is around the Carter's Quay, the resolution from the board back in February to recommend to the Audit and Governance Committee that it instigate an investigation on the Carter's Quay development. This, I've been in touch with the chair of the Audit and Governance Committee and she has advised that they have now requested this investigation. What was asked for by us is they've asked for this to be reported to their next meeting in July. I think it's been delayed. I think it's been around the houses a little bit in that committee, but I think we are getting towards that coming through. So we'll keep that on the action sheet until after their July meeting, I think. Councillor Waite.
May I just add on behalf of the Audit and Governance, it's because of the Head of Internal Audit's holiday, it's likely to be just a verbal update in the July meeting and we're expecting something for August. No, is that not what you said?
That is different to what the chair of Audit and Governance has told me, Councillor Waite. So I can go back and clarify again.
No, I think you're right.
Okay, thank you. So then I have the next two items are 115 and 116 are recommendations that went through to Cabinet from us, but that were not accepted. They've stayed on here. We have been having some discussion about what we do to sort of round these off. And I noticed that Democratic Services have put a note about a recommendation tracker, and I did wonder if Lindsay might be able to come in at this point and just tell us a bit more about that recommendation tracker as a to make sure we understand what's being proposed there. Is that okay, Lindsay?
Yeah, that's fine, Chair. Yeah, at the moment, any recommendations are listed on your action sheet, but what we're planning to do is to launch a recommendation tracker for all the ONS committees. They're being developed and they'll pick up all the recommendations over the last municipal year and then going forward. But that will give more detail on whether recommendations have been fully accepted, partially accepted, or not accepted at all, and then an opportunity for updates. And the proposal is that then as committees you might want to seek regular updates, perhaps every 6 months, on your recommendations, because a key part of overview and scrutiny is monitoring the impact of your recommendations. So yeah, that's what they'll be. They're in development and they'll be with you in the next couple of meetings probably.
Okay, thank you. That's really helpful. So then I suggest that what we do for now is keep these on the action sheet until that tracker is ready. But then in future, where if we have a recommendation like one of these two that goes through to Cabinet, once Cabinet have met, whatever they decide, whether they take our recommendation or not, it then comes off our action sheet because the matter is resolved, but we're recording the outcome of that somewhere else. That makes sense to me. Does that sound okay to everybody else? Okay, lovely. Then we've got, let's have a look. There's from last month, we have the action on the complaints policy, and I think that's being picked up under item 5 tonight under the work plan. So I'll leave that for discussion there. Did just want to flag on item 11 here that the action that the matter blue badges issue be raised with the LGA. My memory is that was something we asked the portfolio holder to do, but it's not clear to me who that action sits with from the tracker. So just something from this sheet. So just something to clarify there as well.
I think this is with Andy Martin, but I do think during the last update he mentioned that he'd been in discussion with the LGA and they were putting together something as a whole organisation with lots and lots of evidence. So they weren't going to do it based on that one recommendation, but they were going to merge a bunch of things together and then put it to government.
Yeah, okay, so yeah, so that is something you agree that that's the portfolio holder is taking that as an action, yes, but as part of a bigger piece of work.
I think he gave us an update on it last time. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay, well that's fine. We can clarify that for next time, I think. And then I think that's pretty much brings us up to date. The arts and culture, the final action there is we are awaiting a response from Cabinet, I believe. So I'm sure that's will be forthcoming soon. Is there anything else that anyone wanted to pick up on the action sheet before we move on? Okay, thank you. In which case, let's move on to item 5, which is the work plan. So we have made a little change to the agenda this time around and put the work plan up front because it's felt that we often get to this at the end of our meetings when we're all a bit worn out. So thank you to all our guests who are here to talk to different agenda items for bearing with us while we go through this item beforehand today. There is a scrutiny request that's come forward from Councillor Howell, And so I'd like to invite Councillor Howell to come and speak first on that, which is the appendix to this item on the agenda. Councillor Howell, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Basically, this relates to how efficiently the council is operating. I've been the council now for 14 years and become increasingly frustrated with essentially what is, I think, an over emphasis on policy discussion and a lack of emphasis on looking at how the council's processes work. As councillors, we are entitled, we're not allowed to order officers around to do things, but we're perfectly entitled to scrutinise the processes that are designed by officers and by which they operate, to see whether we think those are efficient or not. And you know, this is where, in my view, a lot of the savings can be made, and a lot of the frustration that members of the public have with councils and government bodies can be addressed. Is, you know, that frustration is also felt left and right by national politicians, from Trump to Starmer. You know, they're all saying we need to make the machine operate better, but to do that we need to look at how it operates. Now, what I put forward is a proposal that relates to a part of the operational processes, which is largely the member officer relationship. And I think that the recruitment of a new CEO presents an opportunity to strengthen the culture of the working relationships between councillors and officers, and to propose reforms designed to deliver improved performance motivation. So I've split the proposal down into three sections. The first is to encourage more collaboration and team working between officers and members, so that officers are made aware and can take account and show respect for the skills and experience of councillors. And this operates both at a administration level, because both as a portfolio holder and a Leeds member, I experience a lot of frustration in terms of that working relationship, or a lack of working relationship really, between officers and the portfolio holders, because too often the development work goes on out of your sight when it should be going on in together, so that you can work together to get to the right solution. For many councillors for many years have been frustrated about being presented with very limited options at a late stage, when if councillors were involved at a much earlier stage, they could make the process more efficient and get better outcomes. You know, ward councillors, obviously we all get frustrated about that things happen without us knowing about it. The proposals get to a certain stage that we're completely unhappy with the end proposal, and if only we'd been consulted earlier, we could have stopped the spending of that money and use of resource, or redirected it in a better way. The second item relates to accountability. This is also related to administration, portfolio holder issues, but also why your job as a scrutiny committee would be made much easier if you had to access to minutes that were taken in relation to important decisions, that if they were recorded what happens at the moment is you get discussions between portfolio holders and senior officers. They're not minuted at all. So it allows the officers to go away sometimes with the wrong impression, or you can get outcomes that are unexpected because of that. And also the ability, as for example in future places, to understand what happened in the past is massively reduced if you don't have any documentation in place as to what was agreed in meetings as to the way forward. My final point there is in relation, which isn't really member officer so much, but I think it's really important, which is to encourage the council and council officers to respect the local geography of BCP. We all know as councillors that we're not a generic uniform place, that we have different areas with different characters that deserve treatment in different ways sometimes. Can't always do that because of the cost restrictions, but these different characters still need to be respected, and where it's possible, we need to take account of that in the decision-making process. And I think the way that BCP Council has been constructed, and the fact that the centralisation in Bournemouth, the fact that increasingly there's a lot of agency staff or officers working from home, it has disconnected the council from local communities, and we need a focus back in the processes to oblige officers to take into consideration those matters. So I will leave it there, but all I'll say is that if you do a search on the AI and ask it what the solution is, it comes up with lots of very sensible suggestions of the nature that you probably have in your own minds. But I think this would be a really good exercise for you to consider. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Howell. I will ask members to, if they have any questions or make any brief points in a minute. I just, the initial, if I may, the initial thing that struck me, and you have just spoken to it quite clearly there seem to be two quite distinct things within what you're asking here. There's the section you talked about, officer-member relationships, and then there's the section about the 3 towns. And I can see where there are links, but I think those, to me, they feel like two quite separate topics, which could be separated out as two separate areas for scrutiny, rather than being put together in. I feel that if they're put together in one, I don't feel that we've got one clear item to be looking at there. It feels like two.
So I think my thinking has evolved a bit in the time between when I put the request forwards and now. I think it's best to look at it as the top level request is that the committee takes more of a look at operational matters that are raised by councillors as being a concern, and one of a couple of those operational issues are member officer relationships, and how we deal with our localities and make sure they're being served by officers. So I agree that they're two things that sit under an overarching theme.
Okay, thank you. That makes sense. I think from my point of view, we want things to be quite focused when we're doing a piece of scrutiny, because otherwise we have to have a boundary around anything that we're talking about. So for me, those two things would be two separate items. But Councillor Broadhead has indicated.
Thank you very much, Chair. And just on that point, I exactly see what point you're trying to make. They might seem like two different issues, but I hear what Councillor Howell is getting at, and as somebody that's been a councillor for a long time, like him, have experienced many of the same issues. Really good practice and really good working relationships, and then situations where that is not happening. And I'd come to the same conclusion. That is quite often because of really a lack of formalisation of the process. That kind of either deliberate or completely accidental misinterpretation, a kind of reinvention of what's happened in the past, but also the difficulty sometimes for councillors to make clear what their priorities are and how they expect them to be delivered, not necessarily operationally, but certainly how they see the outcomes coming forward. And just on your point about the 3 geographies, I do think that's an expectation that we should be having as councillors for how the process should be operating. So it would be our expectation that these things are taken into consideration when the council officers are deciding how to put things into practice. And I'm not convinced that is formalised in the way that I think Mark is trying to get at, so that we've got that assurance that it's actually happening. So I think it is all under the same banner, which is process, and essentially what our expectations are as members. And I do think there's a acute opportunity to be doing that ahead of the new chief executive coming in, because there is one argument that says, well, isn't that kind of the new chief exec's job to kind of try and figure out how he wants to make that relationship work, and how he envisions all of this operating. But I think it would be even more helpful for that new chief exec to have a clear understanding collectively from members of what our expectation is as well. I think that would be quite helpful for him. So considering the proposal is for a working group, I think that is something that could be wrapped up in a working group. And I actually think that we'd probably have many synergies across all different kinds of members of that, and it would be a really useful exercise.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Broadhead. Did other members want to make any comments or ask any questions about this? Councillor Walters.
Yeah, I broadly support everything in this. I'm more than happy to suggest that it goes forward to a working group. I think it's not me admitting that I think the relationship between councillors and officers is bad, but I don't think there's any reason not to try and push for a better working relationship where possible. I do think quite often the answer to why don't things get done quickly, why are there gaps, why are there sometimes miscommunications, is because, you know, there's been a decade's worth of cuts put on lots of officers having to deal with everything and run around trying to fight fires constantly, and that does lead to not everything being done in the most thoughtful manner all the time. But I wouldn't suggest that officers aren't doing the most that they can right now, but perhaps there are different ways that we could be working. I also wouldn't necessarily criticise the working from home policies. I think where organisations tend to fail in terms of efficiency with working from home policies tends to be where leadership don't quite know how to manage people who work from home, not specifically because of the workers working from home themselves. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, Councillor Northover.
Just to say, I support what you're saying. And I recall in Bournemouth, I don't know if anybody else would remember, maybe Councillor Beasley might remember, in probably 15 or more years ago, we had a project management approach to everything, and we as councillors even had to go and have training so that we could understand how things are supposed to be done, so that we know what we're even looking at when we're seeing how things are progressing and where to find documents and things. So I feel like that's some element of that kind of thing I really noticed it when I came back on the council after a long break, that had kind of gone away, I suppose, with the merger as well. But yeah, I really support it and would like to be involved if there's capacity there for me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Was there any other contributions? Councillor Beasley.
Thank you very much, Chair. Well, in quick response to Councillor Northover, she's absolutely right. And the intention behind that, which worked very well, was to always make sure that councillors were informed, and that the council, whether it's the administration or the council in general, took members with them. So it was about being informed, but it was also about trying to make sure that everybody was aligned in terms of going towards any project or any piece of work in a way that they fully understood and knew how to get involved or to challenge if that's what they wanted to do. I'm wholly behind Councillor Howell's proposal, because I think in many instances we've lost our way. I think that the relationship between some members and some senior officers of this council have almost completely broken down. And I do believe that at the same time, there are a huge number of officers who are there for particularly the right reasons to deliver services to residents and to keep councillors informed. And those officers must feel extremely frustrated by having to endure the difficulties that arise from that not being uniform across the council. I'm not quite clear actually as to perhaps how Councillor Howell wants us to progress with this, because I think what would be a mistake would be if it was all of us talking to ourselves and it was limited to that. It needs to have structure. It needs perhaps to have some professional external involvement. That might come from the LGA, just as an example, I don't know. Although I do know that when I was leader of Bournemouth, we engaged with the LGA a lot over issues where we felt we needed help and support. That's one of the functions that they are there for. This won't be the first time this has ever happened in local government. Therefore, that's possibly a useful staging post. One might ask the question, why haven't we done this before? So I'm very grateful to Councillor Howell bringing it forward. There are a whole range of things in there, but what we do need to do is to make sure we're properly structured in terms of this process, and that we are properly informed. And then the comments that members may have in that process will be able to be properly defined and will be useful to the outcomes of the process. And I do believe, as has already been said, finally, that in preparation for the new Chief Executive, this will be a very useful store of information on which he can draw as he comes into the authority, wanting no doubt to make sure that he hits the ground running and is effective. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Beasley. Councillor Aikenhead.
Yes, I was just thinking that proposing that we do put this on the work plan, but specifically as an item to look at member officer relationships and the processes around those. To suggest that we keep Councillor Howell involved in what we're doing, and that also to suggest that the next step would be to produce a key lines of inquiry document, because we can't actually set up any either working group or a report until we've done that. So if we agree that we put it on the work plan and start working on our key lines of inquiry, that will take us forward with this. Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Aikenhead. I agree that's process-wise, I think the next step. I just wanted, I've seen that you indicated, Councillor Border, I just wanted to say, it's been touched on a couple of times around timescales with the new Chief Executive starting. I think the likelihood of us bringing this to committee before the new Chief Executive starts is quite small. There are only 2 more meetings before that happens. And certainly the July, when we come to the work plan, you'll see that the July meeting is already slightly over full. So that's not to say we shouldn't do anything with it, but just to have that as a caveat in terms of timescales and expectations. But the sense I'm getting from the room is that people would like to add this to the work plan, and I think that we could continue to discuss how best to do that outside the meeting and bring that back to the next, bring back a more worked up proposal to the next committee on how we take this piece of work forward. Does that sound okay? Councillor Broadhead wanted to say something.
Thank you, Chair. Appreciate what the Chair and Vice Chair are trying to get at. I have some concerns. I just don't think it's ambitious enough. I mean, to be fair to Councillor Howell, he did bring this to the last meeting, but we deferred it to this meeting, so we're already 5 weeks on from when this was initially raised. If we simply put it onto the work plan, come up with key lines of inquiries, and then look to do something afterwards, then you're absolutely right. We'll have no chance whatsoever of getting anything of substance before the Chief Exec joins us in September. That being said, I don't think the work needs to be definitively concluded by then, but wouldn't it be great if it had started in earnest? So I see no reason why we can't commit to creating a working group now. I think Mark's been pretty clear with what the working group should do. I don't feel I need to spend loads of time doing a key lines of inquiry document. I think it's pretty clear in the three aims of the working group. And actually the first thing that a working group tends to do is come up with its kind of terms of reference and what it's trying to get out of the process, so that then we might be able to bring something maybe in 2 meetings time, because that's time for a working group to have 2 or 3 meetings and get through some substance, maybe take on board what Councillor Beasley has said, whether one of the outcomes of that might be to recommend commissioning the LGA to do some work. I mean, I do a lot of work as a regional peer with the LGA on exactly this type of thing, and they're well versed in doing it. But why don't we just get cracking on it?
Okay, thank you. So practically speaking, we have an open working group for this committee already, for this board already, and we can't open another one whilst that is ongoing. We don't have officer resource to support it. So I'm really not trying to delay things here. I am just trying to be realistic about what we have capacity to do. So what I'm saying is that I think we should take this forward from here, develop it, move it forward as the committee clearly wants to do. So I hopefully that is acceptable. Councillor Howell?
Yeah, I no wish to tell the committee what it should do. That's your role. But I would say that, or you as collective, not this chair, a good chief executive will come in and take time to look at the organisation before changing things. So I do think you've got a few months to be able to come to report. I would also say you've got to bear in mind that the point about there being lots of good officers in this council is well made, but they are the hierarchical nature of councils means that they're always kind of looking over their shoulder or upwards to make sure that they stay on side, and that can vary about as to the level of force that's applied from above, but it applies to every council, I think, and officers are protected where there are clear processes that are written down that they know that they should follow. So it says, you should consult a councillor in this instance. That's kind of where you need to get to, I think. And there must be good examples out there. One of the positive things about having national political parties involved in local politics must be that you must know other places that do this well or be able to find that out.
Thank you. I have Lindsay indicating, and then I'll come to you, Councillor Dower, if that's okay. Lindsay.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to come in a little on the resources element and the next stages. Just to flag that behind the scenes, along with all the chairs at the moment, we are talking about some cross-cutting issues that were indicated at the last meeting, namely budget scrutiny and local plan scrutiny. So there may be some work and resources aligned to those areas, and there's a significant amount of resource from officers going into scoping those areas at the moment. And there is a significant amount of working group sort of requests on all the work programmes across all ONS committees, more than can be accommodated. So ONS chairs are currently trying to look collectively about what can be prioritised when. So I did want to make a similar flag around resources in that respect. But I think Councillor Howe's comments about time for the Chief Executive to bed in, as it were, are relevant, and work could be done still in that time frame. I think it's really important to get a very clear understanding from Councillor Howe as kind of second stage of scoping now about who he would want to talk to through this work, what questions would be asked, what evidence would be gathered, because we've got some broad aspirational outcomes in the document, but not the detail of, if we were to start tomorrow, what we would do. And I think Councillor Howe is the starting point to get that, and then the committee needs to sign off on what those lines of inquiry would be. A lot of that work could be done, outside of meetings before it's brought formally back in to sign off, but that does need to happen so that we're clear on where we would be going with this. So yeah, I think Councillor Aikenhead's suggestions seem in the right direction for moving it forward.
Thank you, Lindsay. Councillor Dower.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to agree with Councillor Howell about his suggestion about the CEO coming in, because coming from a transformation, delivery, management perspective, which is where I was before, this new CEO is definitely going to come in and want to see everything. So if we're going to do anything, or if anything needs to be done in the time before that person joins, we should be looking at the as-is processes and actually looking at what happens now and getting the process flows written. So then there's a basis to kick that off somewhere else. So I think that would be a way to do it, really. So that was my suggestion, sort of confirming that I agree with Councillor Howell on this.
Thank you, Councillor Dower. It feels to me as though we've got a lot of real strong interest in this topic amongst the committee, and a real desire to take this forward, which I share. I think we have a proposal to put this onto the work plan, to carry on scoping this out a bit further, and I would encourage anyone on the committee to get involved in that process. As Lindsay mentioned, we don't have to wait for the next meeting to do that. We can work in between meetings to move things forward. So I suggest that we do that if everybody is happy with that proposal. That's a Northover.
How can that happen if we haven't got the Democratic Services support? Would we just do that between us? Is that
Sorry,
the scoping before the next
so
meeting?
well, we have a process, don't we? They have a key lands inquiry document which we can use to I think, as Lindsay suggested, to put some specific questions together.
Yeah.
And then I think if Councillor Howell could be take the lead with that, but with members of the committee who are interested feeding in, we can communicate online by email group to take that forward. Does that that sound
sense,
okay?
Yeah, I would be happy to do that, but I think it may be better to do it in a meeting. I'm happy to come to a meeting and just brainstorm it. You know, it tends to work better when everybody can hear in real time what everybody else is thinking about. So.
Okay, so following on from this meeting then, if I send an email to the committee members and yourself and anyone who's interested to indicate that they want to get together to talk about this further, but not in committee time, and we'll take it from there. Does that sound okay?
Thank you very much.
All right, great. Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Howell. Okay, so then we need to move on to the work plan itself, as it appears in the agenda. And there are a few points on a few updates here. So I've got down here that there is a cabinet item, the budget outturn report, that needs to be added to the July meeting. I assume the committee is in agreement that that should be there. Yes. And I also have a note that if the board wishes to consider the pay and reward issue, that this will need we will need to reschedule the July meeting for the 15th in order to take account of the timescales around that piece of work. So that's something that I think I would need the committee's agreement on doing as well. Does anyone have any objections to that suggestion of moving the committee date to the 15th? I'm not seeing any problems there. That does then give us a situation of too much on the agenda for July as well. That gives us, in addition to what's already on the work plan for July. And Councillor Aikenhead and I have had a chat about this just before the meeting. That gives us 3 pre-cabinet items and 1 proactive, which is the outcomes of our existing working group. And so it would seem like the only option to move that agenda, to make that agenda a bit more manageable, would be to push the working group findings on to the August meeting. However, I think what we need to know is whether or not the consultation work that working group is being involved in is going to cabinet before the August meeting. So I think we just need to clarify that, which we won't do now, but just so that you're aware of thoughts shifting about there, and we will continue working on that, trying to make all the agendas manageable for July and August. Does anyone have any questions about that? Councillor Beasley.
Thank you, Chair. Could you just repeat these dates? Because I have in my diary ONS board on the 7th of July, a Monday. That's staying, is it?
No, sorry, that's the one that in order to take account of the pay and reward work and to be able to scrutinise that, I'm advised that we will need to move that meeting to the Tuesday, the 15th of July, because that's when we'll be able, we won't have the information on the pay and reward report until after the 7th, and so that's the next available date that we could have that's the board meeting.
So is that the only change?
That's the only date change, yeah.
Right, okay, so if we want to be here, we'll have to cancel whatever we've already got in our diaries on that night, which I have.
Okay, well, as I say, that's why, sorry if I wasn't clear, Councillor Beasley, but that's why I asked if there was any issue with that as a proposal. If there is, then...
Yes. That's why I'm asking you the question, because I fundamentally put everything to do with the council in my diary before I do anything else, and then I set in stone anything else.
As I understand it, the options we've got are moving it to that date in order to discuss pay and reward, or keeping it where it is and not being able to scrutinise the pay and reward report. So I think that's our choice. Do we need to take a vote on what the committee would rather do?
No, I just wanted clarification.
Okay,
That was also,
yeah.
it sounds as though that's what's been decided, and I'll see whether I can cancel
Hasn't
the
been
other
decided,
arrangement.
but
I'll see whether I can cancel the other arrangement.
okay. Thanks, Councillor Beasley. Okay. Then I think I'm conscious of time and wanting to move us on. The only other things that I had on there to mention on the work plan at this point were we've done a bit more work on scoping out the parking enforcement idea, but I think that's still discussion slightly ongoing on that in terms of exactly how we do it. So I think I'm going to leave that and we'll come back to that at another time. And that was the item that came forward from Councillor Chapman last time. Just to let you know that that work is ongoing to try and work out how we bring that forward to committee. Then there are two items that have been on for a little longer: performance of the council and the CRM system. And I wondered if, looking at those, if both would be possible subjects for a briefing session. We have these new briefing sessions that have been put into the diary for the year ahead for this board. And it struck me that those might both be suitable topics for one of those briefing sessions. Forgive me for not being able to remember who proposed these subjects, and if it was you and you have strong views on that, then please say something now. Not hearing anybody. So I'm going to propose we put those two items forward for briefing sessions, so that they can be scheduled into we have some time in our diaries for those, so they can be scheduled in. Which I think probably takes us to the only other thing was around some of the working groups, which we've already talked about, how we can't set up a new working group or we have one open. We have some that have again been on there for a little while. Councillor Aikenhead, we were talking about the bid one specifically, and you had a suggestion. Can you remind me what that was?
I was suggesting that it may be worth considering, rather than setting up a working group for it, that we ask the officers for a report about what is being done, because we did have a briefing session before. We listened to what all the feedback was from the bid. So I wondered whether it was possible to look into whether it would be more efficient use of our time to ask for a report on that as to what officers are doing about it. Because otherwise, with the number of working groups that we're trying to set up, we might find that it just takes so long to get to it that it's very frustrating for the bid. So it may be that in the meanwhile we could ask for some sort of report as to what's being done to improve it, and then maybe sometime in the future we could have another session where we invite the bids to come in and talk to us and ask them whether things have improved. But obviously we need to make sure we're doing something to improve the situation first. Okay, so we could just look into whether that's a more efficient way than the working group. It would be great.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Aikenhead. So does anyone else have anything they wanted to bring up on the work plan? Councillor Walters.
I was going to say I support the pushing of that bid side of things to what Councillor Aikenhead was suggesting there, because if we do end up doing what Councillor Howell suggested and that ends up being a working group, then we are building up like 3 years worth of working groups here, and I think it'd be worth getting ahead of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Yes, Councillor Aikenhead.
Yes, the other thing just wanted to mention that we need to add the working plan, the item that we agreed last meeting, that I was going to look into councillor involvement and the process for how councillors are involved in the complaints process. That was already agreed to put on the working group, so on the work plan. So I think if we can just add it, and just to let the committee know that I have started the task was for me to look into scoping out any possible work that we might want to do on that. And I've started looking into that and talking to some people about it. And I'm expecting at some committee I will come back with hopefully some, if I believe there is work to be done, key lines of inquiry, so that we can then decide whether to take that forward any further.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Aikenhead. Councillor Broadhead.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Sorry to go back a section, but just on the Business Improvement District suggestions, because I note on the forward plan that it was due to be a working group. In the past, certainly when I was Chair of Overview and Scrutiny, we had the bids invited in once a year to give us a kind of collective presentation. Each of them had a little bit of time to be able to A, demonstrate what they were up to, but B, take questions from us and actually pitch to us of some of the issues that they were finding on the ground, because they're really, really connected with their local towns, and it's really good for us to hear what they've been up to and what their issues are. But also, I think in virtue of the fact that we are withdrawing more and more services and expecting the business improvement districts to pick a lot of those services up, I think it's in public really important that we hear from them, A, how it's going, doing some of the stuff that the council used to do, but also I reflect from those in the past. We heard some pretty negative feedback sometimes from them about they weren't really happy doing this, actually they prefer to do it this way, and we use that to resolve stuff. So rather than a working group, I'd really like to see that on the forward plan as an item, and kind of keep it in there every year, not least because it's becoming more and more of a part of our budget setting. So I think that should be done well ahead of or maybe even as part of the budget setting process, because I can guarantee you, obviously I don't know what's in the plans for next year's budget, but I can tell you with almost certainty that will be more of an expectation on business improvement districts to do more. And they can't put their precept up at all. So I think it'd be really important to see how they're getting on and where are any problems they have.
Okay, thank you. I think that's links into what Councillor Aikenhead proposed around how we move forward with this, but adds a dimension around making it potentially regular and the timings in terms of fitting in with budget settings. So that's a helpful additional suggestion. Thank you. What I'm going to suggest as well is that we, because we need to move on a little bit tonight, that we make sure this is part of our work programming work that we'll pick up again after the summer. For the year ahead for Overview and Scrutiny, so to make sure that's a key element in our work programming in the autumn. Okay, I'm going to move us on to item 6, which is public issues, and I believe that there are no public questions or statements that have been received. Is that correct? Thank you. Okay, in which case we can move straight on then, and thank you everybody who's here to speak to the next item and those afterwards. Thank you for bearing with us. We'll move on now to item 7, which is the Bournemouth Air Festival report. So this is going to be introduced by Councillor Richard Herritt, portfolio holder, Cabinet Member for Destination, Leisure and Commercial Operations. I'm going to hand over to Rich. And we also have here on this item, we have Amanda Barry, the Director of Commercial Operations, and Helen Wildman, the Head of Leisure and Events. So I'm going to hand over to Rich to speak to the report now. Thank you, Rich. Councillor Herritt.
Evening. I'm obviously here to talk through the progress made on exploring external funding options for the Air Festival in 2026 and beyond. Firstly, I need to point out a typo in paragraph 3. This says that a decision needs to be made by June 2026, when this should be June 2025, which is exactly why we are here now. The decision for the council to cease directly funding the airshow was made in November 2023, with September 2024 to be the final one directly funded. It also set in motion a tender exercise for a commercial operator to see if there was anyone able to take on the airshow on a commercial basis, and that concluded with a party being in a position to explore further, and they visited the airshow in 2024 ongoing, where they met with all the various agencies involved to see what the viability was for them, build relationships and explore their options going forward. Significant efforts were also made by the council to lift further the commercialisation of the Air Festival in that year, reducing the deficit it ran to just under £250,000. In October 2024, a further report was made to Cabinet that continued the work on the commercial operation, alongside making sure we were fully exploring sponsorship options into the future. Negotiations commenced with the commercial operator to see what was needed for them to successfully operate the festival on a commercial basis. There were a wide range of requests from them that would have created significant financial pressures on the council, and procurement rules meant that they would have had to reopen the tender process, as their bid was to essentially take on the festival without cost. And those options didn't look quite that viable once tested. One of those requests was also to enable a model that effectively closed the prom and foreshore that would have presented legal difficulties. Just after this paper was released, that commercial operator actually withdrew from the process. And I'm just going to read this out almost verbatim with the redaction of the name of the operator, just so that everyone's kind of got sight of it. But it was a bit of a moving picture, so I didn't want to send anything to the committee when there could have been more to follow. So after a substantial amount of internal discussion and deliberation, we would like to respectfully withdraw consideration to partner with BCP to promote and deliver an air festival in Bournemouth. Several factors led us to this decision, with the most significant being that without the ability to fence up and restrict access to a significant part of the beach and surrounding areas, it would be challenging to create a financially sustainable event model. The instability of the financial and political climates were also factors that would challenge us to deliver the event in a similar manner to our other events. We very much appreciate and thank you for your time and that you and your team have given us, and we wish you the best of luck in finding the right partner for the continuation of the event. Should you have any questions at all, please feel free to reach out anytime. Now, I don't know if I can share the partner, but they are in an American company, which I think gives maybe some context to the political as well. This obviously essentially removes one of the options that was on the paper and takes us down to retest the market, seek further sponsorship, or cease active work on those. The recommendation is for ceasing work, but actually I think retesting the market and retesting the market is probably the wrong word, but seeking further sponsorship or receiving further events always remain on the table. And as officers continue to explore events as requests to host them do come in. We could write a specification for a destination event and tender it. However, the ability of the council to fund that event is still not there, meaning it would just become an event that's being held on council land, which we are absolutely open to anyway. Seeking sponsorship sits under the same umbrella, really, that if someone is willing to come and give us £400,000 to put on that event, officers would absolutely be able to do that given enough time. So whilst the third option is the recommendation, this is to enable our officers to really work on receiving and enabling events with more capacity and make sure that this is their focus. We already have inquiries live for other events in 2026 across music and sport, and having capacity to take them forward and allowing officers to focus on them means that we can actually bring the benefit and expertise across the whole of the BCP area as well. I'd also like to make it clear that if someone wants to propose and or fund that festival, it is well within the council's expertise and capability to do that. It is just the active pursual for commercial operators and sponsors that we are recommending to cease at this time.
Thank you, Councillor Herritt. So I would like to open up now to questions from the committee, please. Councillor Northover.
I don't know if you'll know the answer, but maybe somebody will. At what point does something that's just a fly past of the red arrows turn into something that needs terrorism thought and loads of fencing and loudspeakers? And because those are all the horrible things I think about the Air Festival. The reason that I actually leave Bournemouth, you know, it's really like horrible and unpleasant. But I think a lot of people would just come just if the red arrows came, you know, on a Sunday. That's still going to bring a lot of people. And could we do something that's just much, much more low key, like book some displays every Sunday over August or something like that, that is still got some of it, but maybe doesn't need all of that infrastructure and security and things like that. And also perhaps people might be more inclined to sponsor something like that because it might just be 20,000.
Thank you. Go ahead.
In terms of the difference between a fly past and a display, that is a fly past is literally the aircraft flying. A display that would bring the crowds and the tourism that we would be looking for would need a lot of additional measures. So there's Civil Aviation Authority guidance, which we would have to comply with. So that would be some of the costs in terms of exclusion zones and the emergency service provision that we'd have to do. In terms of some of the other elements, in terms of the sort of counter-terrorism measures and the infrastructure, that largely depends on numbers. So the more people you bring would depend on what measures we'd need to put in place, and we'd work with people like the police to do that. In terms of costs, there would still be quite a lot of infrastructure costs to do that. So for a small display, take the red arrows of a 20-minute display, there would still be significant infrastructure costs and possibly less time to be able to bring in the commercial income that we would do for the Air Festival. Does that answer your question?
Yes, go ahead.
So say for Friday night fireworks, if we still do them, I'm not sure, but do we have to do all of that for those?
So there are measures in place for events like that, and depending on, there's specific event guidance that we would have to abide by. So yes, we would work with the emergency services. We'd have things like first aid provisions, exclusion zones for fireworks, security. So yes, but on a slightly different scale depending on what it is.
Thank you very much. Councillor Herriot, I think you wanted to respond as well.
Yeah, I wanted to add that on the horizon, we've also got Martin's Law that is looming over the event industry quite significantly in terms of. Sorry, that's literally my worst nightmare. The big light going on. Yeah, so Martin's Law looms large, which is going to put significant pressure on events over 200 and then 800, and is really kind of going to be quite impactful. That's currently not got an implementation date, but we're looking at either spring or autumn next year, I think is quite likely, and that's going to significantly add to costs and risks of pretty much any event anywhere. And we, as a council, Amanda chairs a working group that's examining the impact of that as we work through, and all events are on there. Sorry, I'll clarify.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, could you explain what Martin's Law is?
Martin's Law is a response to the Manchester Arena bombings in, oh God, I can't remember the year, but obviously I think a few years ago now. And yeah, and as with a lot of these things, puts quite a lot of onus on, it's probably going to be local authorities to pick up a lot of these issues, but has quite a lot of anti-terror measures in there around vehicle access, around marauding attackers, around all sorts of risks that obviously you would associate with large things. And it might not change what has to be done, but it certainly changes the record and some of the things that would have to go in front of that. Amanda would be in a better position, and I'm sure we'd be happy to scrutinise it further as it comes along, but as a context, that's probably where we need to be.
Helen, did you want to, no. Amanda, do you want to add something? Apologies.
Thank you. Just to add to what Councillor Herriot has said, the Martin's Law legislation does provide requirements for both internal venues with a lower capacity and also a sort of enhanced tier, but also a number of events in outdoor space. And the examples that we've spoken about in terms of an air display or the fireworks would fall into that. There's still a lot we need to understand in terms of what we have to do and how we do it and exactly an implementation date, but that's what we're working through as a council to then understand how we can work with our partners to support them, but also what we then have to deliver.
Thank you. I have Councillor Broadhead, I think, indicated.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. I've got a couple of questions on the finances, so I'll just come on to those in a moment. But before I do, can I just say I agree with Councillor Lisa Northover on many things. We're many things that we agree on, but I couldn't disagree more. I do not think the Bournemouth Air Festival is, in her words, horrible and unpleasant. I think it's been exciting and impressive, and a clear staple of Bournemouth's tourism calendar. And I'm sure that many of our hotels and tourism businesses and hospitality, I'll terrified to see it going, and certainly wouldn't like to hear people just think, oh, it's horrible and unpleasant, can we just have a flyover? So I think it's important spelling out the differences. The first question I have, Chair, I just want to give a bit of background on the finances on this, because it is important to the question that I want to raise. In 2023, when we're doing the budget setting, the Unity Alliance parties put forward a budget amendment to start the process of scrapping the Air Festival. Indeed, another party wanted to scrap it entirely. And during the course of that public meeting, this is the budget setting meeting, it actually emerged that the £400,000 cost that was shown in the papers as a kind of cost of the Air Festival was actually only the cost for the service, the tourist department. And the then Chief Operating Officer, Jess Gibbons, confirmed in the meeting that that income didn't include other sources of income from other services, such as car parking and other bits and pieces. So following that, so that wasn't the true net cost, essentially, of the Air Festival. Following that, we did some further work, because I was a deputy leader at the time, to ascertain, if I was leader at the time, to ascertain what the real cost of the Air Festival was, and to work those estimates in. And we got to the figure of around the net cost was probably closer to £100,000. Now, after the election, the administration recalculated, did some further work, and decided that we should include what they call staff recharge into the net cost. Now, for those that don't know what that means, that essentially means looking at staff that already work for the council that are probably going to do some Air Festival work, working out what the cost would be for them doing that instead of the day job, and then charge that back in. And then miraculously, the net cost for the council was 400,000 again. The reason I raise that is because that staff surcharge, in my view, isn't a real cost. It's the staff that are already doing a job, and we've got our previous workings out that showed that the actual net cost of the council was much less. Fast forward to this year, we've had a curtailed Air Festival put forward in this year's budget that cost I think 248,000. It said in the papers. So my first question is this staff recharge still a part of the costings for this year's Air Festival?
Who would like to take that question?
I mean, in short, yes. Because obviously if they're working on the Air Festival, they're not doing something else. And that's actually the whole point of this paper, is that we want to release the staff that are working on the sponsorship options and that commercial option to be able to further a wider variety of events. So yeah, I think staff cost is always a factor in everything that you do, because without the staff you couldn't do anything, and if you're not paying them, they're obviously not going to be working. So I think discounting staff cost from how you fund an event is just, it doesn't really work as a logical kind of explainer.
Yes,
Thank
Councillor.
you. I mean, it's good to get that clarity, because we don't tend to do it elsewhere in the council, and I completely understand that if you bring on extra staff for a particular event or project, then of course there is a cost to it. But when you've essentially got staff that already work for the council doing one thing or doing another thing, you don't tend to recharge across different departments. So it is good to have that clarity that the 248,000 is not how much it costs the council, it is how much in total they've essentially put aside. Now, the second question I've got is actually just around the economic impact. So we did a study a number of years ago, which was an independent study that basically said that even if you took the 400,000 or 250,000, the impact to the economy, on the tourism economy, just for that event was a £59 million impact to the Bournemouth's tourism, Bournemouth, Christchurch and Pools economy. That is the extra money that the Air Festival brings in. Obviously not directly to the council, but to the rest of the economy. Do you disagree with that?
Thank you. Sorry, Glyn indicated you wanted to address something. I don't know if it was specifically the final question that you ended on there.
I just wanted to make a point of clarity, if that was okay, just for understanding. So you're absolutely correct in terms of the 248,000 being the cost in here. But I want us to be very clear that the way that we calculate that is the true net cost of the Air Festival, so taking into account our income that we brought in from the parking, etc., the commercials that come directly into the council, our staff costs, but also all of our other costs. So that £248,000 for 2024 is the net cost to the council. It isn't just the staff recharges. I think it's important just to make that clarity.
Thank you. And then so to come to Phil's question, which was Councillor Broadhead's question, which was about around the wider financial
Yeah,
situation.
that figure's not borne out from the reports that I've got. I think with a 14 million added value from the shape, which is not insignificant. And I think our local economy does appreciate that. But the reality of funding, at the risk of going over the original decision over whether to fund the air show or not, does essentially come down to, are we in a position to do that right now? And unfortunately not.
I have got a few people waiting to
just
speak.
final point on that.
Very briefly,
If I
Councillor
could.
Broadhead.
So, and I will come back in a little bit, because I think that comes down to the crux what the cabinet member has just said. The options paper that we have in front of us is predicated on a decision that we were told at the time was not scrapping the air festival. It was to find a commercial way of doing things that continued it, albeit for a pause of 1 year, but wasn't scrapping the air festival. A number of us at the time had some kind of question marks over whether that was the end outcome or whether this was a prelude to the air festival being no more. And we were told, no, that's not the administration's ambition. Well, we've been proved right. So I do not see why there isn't an option to revisit the decision. I'll be talking a little bit more about that in a while, because the decision that was made earlier on was to explore options for how it could continue commercially. If, as we've heard, that is not possible, then considering we know that it was relatively successful this year, 248,000, for even by the cabinet members more lowly figure of £15 million to the local economy, it sounds like an incredibly good value for money investment to me. And I'm sure there are many other things the administration could juggle around with to show that they do value our tourism economy. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I had Councillor Dower next.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, I just want to say, Councillor Northover, I sort of agree with you partially, because I don't really like the flyover either. Because I think we're in a climate emergency now. We should be looking at different ways to attract tourists to Bournemouth. I believe that the Air Festival has had its day. I think it's done. I think there are other things that we can do. We've got sports, we've got an amazing beach, we've got a fabulous place in Bournemouth Pool and Christchurch. We should be looking at other ways to attract those tourists. So we've got things like sport, water sport, health, wellness, those kind of things. Obviously, Martin's Law is going to have an impact on whatever we do in the future, because anything that's going to have attract people will have to be supported by Martin's Law. So that is going to have an impact, whatever. I'm not really sure this £59 million thing, how much of that actually goes back into the council taxpayers of Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole? How much goes back into their pockets? I'm not really sure there's much at all that goes back to them. So, and how much actually goes back up to London or to non-UK tax-paying organisations? If we don't know, £59 million is a great number. Yeah, but how much of that actually goes back to our council taxpayers? And I'm not really sure that we know that. So I think that's my point, really.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Dower. Councillor Aikenhead, you wanted to come in.
Yes, so I agree with some people and not with others, and some people I agree with a little bit and not others. So, you know, actually I've been to the Air Festival last year and the year before, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I think it was a great day out. Okay, but at the same time, I do reckon that we do have a climate emergency. I think if we had all the money in the world, I'd really like to see us finding ways to mitigate the carbon that we use in it and still somehow be able to justify running the event. So I wouldn't be up for totally scrapping it. However, we don't have all the money in the world. The cost to the council of the staff time absolutely should be included. And if we're not including it in other things, maybe we should, because our staff are really overloaded with the amount of work that we're expecting them to do. And all the time we're saying we want to cut things. We've even been making people redundant. So we've got less staff than we had. and there's only a certain amount these staff can do. And if they're not doing one thing, then they can do something else. So I absolutely think we should be considering the cost to the council of staff time in everything that we consider. So in all, I feel that however great the Air Festival is, we don't have the money to do it in BCP, and that's that's a sad thing. But it's what do we spend our money on? We have got children who need to go to school, children with special needs but we're not able to find them schools. We have we spend so much of our money on social care, so such a big proportion on social care. You all know, because you've all seen the difficulty that we have when we come to the budget setting, that we're looking through that budget saying, what do we cut? What can we do? What can we not do? So I really don't think that we can afford to have an air festival. And I think that's really sad for all the businesses that need the air festival. But I think in the end, somebody somewhere has got to, it's not making a profit. It's not commercially viable. If it was something that was really useful for the town, for advertising, then the people it's useful to need to come together and pay for it. If it's commercially viable, somebody out there will come forward and pay for it. But we as a council cannot afford to do that, because there are too many other things that we need to pay for with that money that are much more urgent. So I'm going to move that we that it's a very sensible recommendation. It doesn't scrap the air festival. It doesn't say on principle we don't want to have it. It just says we're not going to waste our time trying to make something work that we don't have the money for right now. And if opportunities come up in the future, we're going to take them. It's so sensible. So I'm going to move that we as a committee agree with that recommendation that has been made to Cabinet.
Okay, and to Councillor Dara seconding. So we have a proposal on the table. Sorry, I'll say that again. Councillor Dara has seconded that proposal. And so we have that on the table. And I have seen that Councillor Trent was indicating, so I'm going to turn to him to speak next.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think the Air Festival is one of those things that's nice to have, but it's got bigger and bigger every year. I actually remember the Air Festival when it was actually held at Herne Airport and was considerably more modest than it is now. It has grown and grown significantly over the years. I think it's a pity that the ABID fell apart, because I think that was an area where perhaps it could have been supported. I think that whatever happened, it would need to be looked at again, because perhaps if it was part of a wider event that perhaps goes on over 1 or 2 days rather than a 4-day event, then it might become something more viable and something that involves the community more. I've lost my thread on the other thing, because I was going to say something else on that, but I do think that it isn't viable at the moment. Yes, what I was going to say actually is the amount of money that goes into supporting that one event. That money, or less than that money, supports things for a whole year and provides something that goes on week in, week out over the whole year. So we've actually got to bear that in mind, that it is being blown on a few days. As I say, I would be up for something perhaps a little bit more modest, linked to maybe a carnival or something like that. But reluctantly, I sort of accept we are where we are, and unless people come forward with the sponsorship and the money to support it, then I can't really see what else we can do.
Thank you, Councillor Trent. I did want to just touch on Councillor Trent made reference to the accommodation bid, which obviously hasn't come to anything, but it was a more generally, I wanted to see if Councillor Herritt or the officers could say anything about any conversations that have been had with the existing bids around any of this. It is a point that Councillor Aikenhead's raised and made very well, I think, that we accept the air show brings a lot of money into the local area, benefiting local businesses, but it does appear that no local businesses seem to be interested in taking over the running of it to protect that income coming into our local area. So if there's anything more that you're able to say to us around conversations that have been had up to now, that might be very helpful. Thank you.
On the ABID, I'm not involved in that, as obviously the ballot fell before I was, as I was kind of in post. But I don't think it's entirely gone. I think the board are currently considering options as to where they go next on that. So it does remain a potential option, but I think that's for that group to really decide. With regard to further bids, as we've kind of established, £400,000 is quite a lot of money to find, and as actually Councillor Broadhead has pointed out, the bids have had to pick up bits and things as our funding has ceased, and they've looked to step into some of the voids, and they also operate to a business plan that they're elected on, and whilst they could run on that business plan for their next term in terms of, you know, bring back the air show, keep funding the air show, they could absolutely do that. I think finding that stretch out of their budget, isn't it? I will just say though that in conversations with some of those groups, someone did suggest that we could put an additional council tax levy on of a few pounds to help fund the air show. I did suggest that sounded an awful lot like a town council, but that is an option. You know, if a town council wanted to be established and that was their sole existence was to help fund an air show, that would also be an option for the residents to take forward.
Thank you. Did I have any other people wanting to speak? Okay, I see Councillor Goodall, and then I'll go to Councillor Beasley, Councillor Walters, and Councillor Broadhead, just because you've spoken already, Councillor. So we'll just try and give everyone a chance. Councillor Goodall first.
I just wanted to seek clarification, if I may, on the Open Spaces Act of 1906 and what that prevents us from doing.
Just think back that far, Richard.
I will say I don't really understand the exact detail in that act, just that we did take advice and that it wouldn't be permitted under that act and leave the council open to legal challenge.
Sorry, I mean, I understand the premise of having a beach party, and I think it's a lovely idea of being able to block it off, but whether or not you could have a beach party, but would it be free up on top of the cliff so that people still look down, for example? Well, you don't know the answer to that, I guess.
Well, so that balance was one of the challenges that the commercial operator would have been weighing up, and also for the council in terms of operating it kind of neutrally cost, where that cost for policing that and dealing with the amount of people in that space fell is another significant challenge. And actually, if you think about further commercialising and looking, because it's not that we can do nothing on the beach, it's just that full closure was not an option. Even then, you've still got that kind of that cliff top space that is a really great feature of the Air Festival, but unfortunately also means that commercialising it has significant challenges.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Beasley, please.
Well, thank you, Chair. Just before I begin, Councillor Trent referenced the air show that was held out at the airport. That was the case many years ago. That came to an end for totally different reasons, and it wasn't something that the council was directly involved with in any case. So the brief history of the Air Festival, I think, is relevant to our understanding of what has occurred. And I'm amazed, actually, at no stage have I ever been asked for any history, any background, or indeed any view of any of the detail, which is surprising given that I started working with Mark Smith, who was the then Director of Tourism, on the idea of an air festival rather than an air show, an air festival back in 2006. And we managed at pace, because of the state of the local tourism economy in particular, we managed at pace to line up the first Air Festival in 2008. So we have had, up to last year, 16 air festivals, with 1 year as an interregnum around COVID, 16, and they've remained broadly similar. They haven't grown exponentially. They have focused in on the things that are good and the things that are profitable, both for the council and for the resort. And it just seems to me that the decision has been made to bring it to an end, and I think that that is deeply regrettable, because having come to an end, it won't start again. I can pretty much guarantee that. If you have a break, the infrastructure required, particularly around Civil Aviation Authority and many other bodies, simply won't happen. And I think everybody really knows that. So bringing it to an end is a decision in and of itself. But it comes at a time when I think the tourism industry, of which I am a member, related to, and it now has no tourism department, not really any tourism officers, the Air Festival being brought to an end. It has precious little support around economic development, which is critical in any local authority. And at the same time, our competitors are observing it and taking advantage of it. If you talk to Torbay, that has had a relatively small air show, they're seeing that, they're expanding what they do, and they're taking advantage of it. And who can blame them? And you look around the country at plenty of other places that at least try, that have perhaps the red arrows for a display or do other things. We're not going to get anything. And yet this is a huge English seaside resort. And I think in and of itself, that says quite a lot. We've got rid of the director of events, John Weaver, who's the person who made it all work. And indeed, if you look at some of the costs that were incurred last year, I would challenge those in terms of their necessity, and quite a lot of wastage in there, which anybody could observe, which could easily have been culled with the right expertise on board. I'd also challenge this figure of 400,000. I hear it all the time, but I cannot see how it's properly quantified. And that to me is really a very poor way for a local authority to behave around the finances of an event so important. It's given Bournemouth and the wider Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole area not just national but international profile. And it's something that is deeply regretted in terms of its removal. And to try and expect somebody in the private sector to come up and financially make it happen is unrealistic. It doesn't happen anywhere else, and it certainly wouldn't be any different here in Bournemouth. And then in addition to that, the issue of full cost recovery, which in and of itself sounds quite interesting. It sounds quite something we should be supporting, but full cost recovery taken to its natural extension means that it's very, very difficult for anybody to come into Bournemouth and take over the festival. It is made very difficult financially for them because of the council's position over full cost recovery and its special position in being able to procure some of the things that are absolutely necessary to run the Air Festival, which the private sector are going to have to pay a considerable amount more to be able to do. I can talk to the portfolio holder outside of this meeting to help him understand what it is that I'm saying. But I do think that this is a choice, and in making a choice like this, it is to say that the council has no other areas where it can be saving money, which frankly, in many cases, it is wasting. And yet that is cited as being a good reason to get rid of it because it's costing money. Where there's a will, there's a way. When we introduced the festival all those years ago, we took a risk. It was a risk that was really worthwhile and put Bournemouth right up there in the public profile. And it's repaid this resort and its economic development, particularly around tourism jobs, the largest employer in the area is tourism, and it's helped support that in the most difficult of times. I want to just make those points because I think they're really important. And I think finally, what I would say is this. I talk about the council, if it really had a will not to waste money, if it really had a will to do that, it would be doing that. And frankly, it's not. I'll give you just one example. I've spent the last 18 months trying to prize out of this council information around a legal adventure that this council took that nobody knows about, that cost this council in the order of £1 million, £1 million. And to get that information has been probably the most difficult task I've ever taken on, and not one member actually knows about it. How many festivals would that have funded? I ask you. Even if you take a modest £250,000 cost, that's 4 air festivals. And we wasted that much money without a second thought. So, Chair, I think that if there were a will to do this properly and to support Bournemouth, rather than to try and denigrate everything within what I think our Chief Executive refers to as the Bournemouth culture, then we would leave this place in a much better place than we found it.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Beazley. We're going to move on to Councillor Waters.
Thank you. The tourism industry didn't want to fund the air show. We asked for donations, very little was forthcoming, so residents don't want to fund the air show. If the £59 million figure was true, then surely the brilliant system of capitalism that we have wouldn't let these insane profits go unearned. Hoteliers fought against the creation of the ABID that could have funded this event. Why should the taxpayer and the council socialise the costs whilst the companies privatise the profits without funding the event? Other councillors may doubt the £400,000 figure. If it was profitable for the council, then why has a company whose only literal reason for existence is to make money from air shows said that it's not? I would suggest that if this event truly makes such great profit, that the private sector step up and save it.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Walters. Councillor Broadhead, you wanted to come back in?
Yes, well, thank you. Well, based on that last point, there's probably very little that the council should be doing other than providing services. It certainly shouldn't have an economic development function. It shouldn't have a tourism department. Oh, wait, we don't have a tourism department anymore. I just think that the next logical step of saying that we shouldn't fund anything that doesn't immediately bring money directly into the council is just giving up on having any ambition for our area whatsoever. Now, Chair, we heard earlier on, well, what does it bring to the council taxpayers? Well, ask anybody that works in the tourism or hospitality business what it does. I mean, bear in mind, the idea with the Air Festival is right at the very end, the last week of the season as well. And I think any hotelier will tell you that it's been almost existentially important with them in terms of extending the season, bringing in extra income. We are a tourist resort. Bournemouth is a tourist resort. That is what we should be doing. This idea that, well, why doesn't the tourism industry pay for it then? Why doesn't, I heard earlier on a councillor colleague saying, why doesn't a local business take it on? The scale of these municipal events is such that an individual just simply cannot take it on. But it doesn't mean that they don't dramatically suffer the consequence when we give up on our ambition of being a tourist resort. Now, I'm slightly perturbed at the recommendation that we've got in front of us, Chair, because I mentioned earlier on that I was wanting to make a recommendation, but you've taken that recommendation now, so I'm probably not going to have the chance. But what I will say is that the recommendation that I was going to make, that I hinted at, was that there is a better way, which is not to look at the 4 options presented to us, but to recommend to Cabinet that there was a 5th option, which is to revisit the decision for the council to fund this. Even if you took the modest version of the Air Festival that happened last year, which in our own papers is at 248,000, including staff recharge costs, and you've heard my pessimism about that statement because it's not real money. Even if that was the case, as Councillor Beazley has really eloquently pointed out, it is just a case of political priorities. Now, you've heard from the Cabinet member that his view is, well, the answer is just more tax. Let's, in his words, create some more town councils. They can charge more council tax and they can pay for it instead. But I think that is a dereliction of duty to the council. It is completely within the ability of a council with a budget like this to call this a political priority. And it's always been a political priority for the Conservatives, and we've never said anything other than the fact that it is absolutely sacrosanct in our view. It is absolutely possible to finance it. And I'll give you one other example over and above Councillor Beasley's. Recently, and I'm not trying to create a culture war, I'm just using this as an example of the fact that, there are priorities out there. The council's ambitions for 20-mile-per-hour speed limits are currently in consultation for the first zone, which is in my ward. I was told it wasn't a blanket 20-mile-per-hour speed limit, but every single road in that is covered. Guess how much the cost is going to be for that area just to install the signs and for public engagement? £250,000, exactly the cost of putting the Air Festival on last year. It's all about political priorities, and I know where this administration's ones are. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Broadhead. I see Councillor Herrick would like to respond, and then I would like to say a few things as well, if I may.
I'd just like to clarify that the money for the 20-mile-an-hour limits comes from the LTP money, which is funded from government, which we seem to have to go through every time they're mentioned, but I will do it again.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Herrick. I think there are a few things that I have come to mind whilst listening to this discussion. It is clear that the air show does bring money into our local area, and I don't myself see anything in this report that says it's not something. We shouldn't be trying to bring destination events into BCP and make them work and bring all those benefits in. But I think several people have touched on the fact that this event the council can no longer fund as it has been able to do in the past, and there are lots of reasons for that. We know that our budgets are getting ever more and more stretched. You're right, there are decisions and choices to be made, but not the last budget, but the one before, we cut spending on libraries by £500,000, and I think that people pay their council tax expecting a library service, rather than expecting to subsidise businesses for a few days of income in a year. I actually think most people would consider a library service to be far more a core part of what they pay their council tax for than an air show. There are always choices to be made, and they're not easy. And I don't think anyone would gleefully want to see a good big event that brings interest and money and an investment into the area disappear. But it seems to me this report sets out very clearly that all those steps that have been taken that possibly can to try and find a way forward, the recommendation in front of us doesn't shut off any further attempts to bring a different destination event or events to forward. And sometimes we have to move with the times and go, right, well, we've done something and it worked for a certain amount of time, and now we'll look for the opportunities there are to bring the next thing forward, to keep finding ways within a different financial situation that we're now in. That's just my thoughts. I'm going to return to Councillor Aikenhead because she has this proposal on the table. I think she would like to say a few more words about it.
Just to answer a couple of things that people have said, I believe this the proposal I've made is the most sensible and logical one to do. I completely agree with Councillor Broadhead that economic development is really important. I don't believe this proposal I've made is against that, and I think that if we can use some of the money that the staff time to actually do some economic development instead of chasing after trying to make the festival work and not getting anywhere, I think that is actually a good use of time. And then I would just like to leave you with the thought in terms of wasted money, of how many festivals could we have funded with the money that's been wasted on Carter's Quay.
So I thank you, Councillor. I think, therefore, could we move to a vote on the proposal that we have, which is that the board supports the recommendation in the report. Can I see all those in favour of that recommendation?
9 in favour.
And all those against?
2 against.
And
Last of my votes recorded, please.
certainly. And were there any abstentions? I don't think so. No. Thank you. Okay, thanks very much. Thank you very much, Councillor Herriott and Amanda and Helen as well. So we'll move on. We'll move on now to item 8, which is the Bournemouth Development Company Winter Gardens project. Bear with me. So this is a report that's coming to Cabinet this month, and it is going to be introduced to us by the leader, Councillor Millie Earle. We also have Amina Matin and Rob Dunford. I think, is Rob here? Is he online?
Rob is not
Rob is not with us. No, we have Amanda here. Sorry, Amina here as well. But I'll hand over to the leader to introduce the item.
Thank you, and good evening. This paper follows on from the paper a couple of months ago about the Winter Garden site, which updated Cabinet and Overview and Scrutiny panel and board on progress since the BDC Strategy Day that we held in December last year. Cabinet was asked to extend the site option execution date to the 30th of September 2028, and this paper confirms that, in tandem with asking approval for the BDC partnership business plan for 25 to 2030. This will allow Muse, who are our private sector partner in BDC, to fund the initial stage of the new Winter Gardens scheme and create a new site development plan with the understanding that the public parking will not be included in the new scheme design. BDC are working towards the site development plan being presented in December of this year. It will outline a full financial implications for the scheme, allowing a decision to be made on progressing to the next stage of the detailed design and planning work. And it's that detailed design and planning work which carries a really significant cost. So we need to make sure we've got our numbers properly sorted out before we commit to that stage. The STP will also include a funding strategy, so looking at options for us as a council to consider, making sure that we can potentially get any funding contributions from elsewhere, but also look at the pre-construction spend requirements. So there's still quite a lot of costs in that site prior to actually building anything. That will also bring into play a valuation of the land, which we currently own, so like the car park, to assess the value of the project of the BCP contributing the land for development. The rest of the site is owned by BDC, with the purchase having been jointly funded by Muse and the council. Looking ahead, the site development plan is really quite important when we do come across making this decision. If it doesn't produce what we want it to do, and if it doesn't produce an acceptable use of the site or a manageable funding plan, or if it doesn't signify value for money or value for what this council is aiming to achieve, which is affordable, safe, accessible housing on site, then we'll identify those at that stage and decide whether or not we want to progress. I was also just going to highlight the contents of the business plan, which has been updated to reflect the impact of the recent economic challenges, but it also sets out the strategic direction for the next 5 years of the BDC, with a strong emphasis on adapting to market conditions and aligning with this council's new strategic objectives. The 2025 version was drafted together with Muse and our officers, including those in legal and in finance. And I understand that our BDC board members are content with the contents as well. I think that's all I've got to say at this point, but very happy to answer questions. Thank you.
Thank you, leader. So I'll open up to the board members now for any questions they might have. First of all, have any questions on this report? No? Do we have any? Councillor Beasley.
Well, thank you, Chair. I think a little bit of overview and scrutiny from this board would be appropriate for such an important development. I have written at some length to the leader of the council about the Winter Garden site. in some detail as well, not least because I was one of those who was party to setting up the Bournemouth Development Company, and I know the history of the site particularly well. Again, like the previous item, nobody's ever asked me anything, and I can only draw the conclusion that with the churn of officers that has been since then, that somehow, some miraculous way, all of that information has made its way through to the council. I think that unlikely though. And it just seems to me that there are opportunities in here, as we heard at the last time this board looked at this item, that I think are trying to defy gravity to some extent. So I would like to know far more about the position with Homes England and the funding streams that were in place previously. I'd like to know a great deal more about how a 500 unit scheme can be progressed within the council's, effectively the council's and Muse's resources, because that is a very substantial piece of development. And it does require a proper plan around it that talks not only about the high level things, but the delivery of that, how it's going to be progressed, how it's going to be financed, how it's going to most importantly be cash flowed, because that will no doubt be the critical issue as far as finance here is concerned. Once we've started, and if we can't cash flow it later, we are in trouble, which is usually where developers become unhooked along the way. And I would be very interested to learn, with that size of development, very rare in this country to go ahead with a development of 500 units, which are all in one place. Very rare indeed. I can only think of a couple of examples in London, for example, so I'd be interested to know about that. I'd be very interested to learn about the level of expertise and more particularly experience that we have to be able to be making these decisions and to be actually far more engaged as councillors around the detail of this as we go forward. Because I well remember all the previous debates, and I don't believe that the majority, probably the overwhelming majority of members, have either been engaged in this or in fact understand the detail, because they haven't really been given it, nor been given the opportunity to spend the time that's necessary to fully understand it and the implications.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. There were quite a lot of questions in there. Leader or Amina or both, would you like to address?
Yeah,
any of those?
I mean, a lot of those questions, like I said in my introduction, will be answered through the next stage when the site development plan comes back to us in December. And of course, I would always welcome coming to Scrutiny to talk about it a bit further. And I would actually challenge that. I think that members do have the opportunity to talk about these things. In fact, I've come to Scrutiny, 4 or 5 times over the last year to talk specifically about BDC, regeneration, planning, local plan, all sorts of things in this area, and of course economic development as well. So it's not that there isn't the opportunity there for members to scrutinise. In fact, I think they do. And that's where I think we value the input of members who have been around for a lot longer than others. And that it's given in a constructive way in Scrutiny, rather than us having chats or whatever to try and gain further information. I think that when this information does come in December, we have to be very real with ourselves, and if the numbers don't stack up, if we don't get the support that we potentially need from external funding, if we can't make it work financially, then we have to think about alternative uses for the site. So just to look at the numbers before, I think, so looking back, the planning for creating public parking on the site made it entirely unviable. In fact, it had reached about £28 million by November 2021. 7.7 was requested from the BCP Futures Fund, but that never appeared. Homes England grant didn't come through because Homes England are very clear they don't subsidise private parking or parking in public parking in that sense. So they wouldn't give their support. And really the cost of providing that additional podium was looking at somewhere between 21 million, just over 21 million in 2021. And we're now 2025 and we know that the costs have gone way higher than that. For me, this is about, do we want to develop the site or not? Our partners, Muse, through BDC, have been very clear that to be able to do the next stage of work, we would like to give them that assurance that there is an option here not to develop the public parking. And that's why I've been keen to bring it to scrutiny and also to take it through cabinet. So I'm hopeful that this will actually unlock the site and deliver the homes that we desperately need and the regeneration that we want to see in the town centre. I'm quite excited about what we see in December and hope that it will be something that's financially sound, that of course we want to deliver.
Thank you, Leader. Did we have anybody else wanting to come in at this point? Councillor Goodall?
I just wanted to touch base on the appendix. It's on page 87. It says, from the core strategy, it seems there is no intention to deliver a park and ride for Bournemouth prior to 2026. However, a reference is made to the longer term potential for a network of park and ride sites across South East Dorset. Now, I just wondered firstly whether these had been identified and whether there's a symbiotic relationship between what we're proposing in the business plan now and the use of park and ride and cycleways because of the lack of parking. And I wondered if there was any information we have and whether, as I say, whether the sites have been identified yet.
Thank you. I think that is a reference to work within LTP3, and therefore it's slightly at one step removed from this report. I may be wrong, but if anybody here did have any answers to Councillor Goodall's question, otherwise it might be one we have to take away to somewhere else. Leader.
I wondered if Councillor Beasley might know more about that one. Councillor Beasley?
Well, Chair, I'm always happy to help, but just going back to my previous set of questions, I listened carefully to what the leader had to say, but I didn't get any specific answers about them. And they are real concerns. They're going to come back in December, for sure. And if they are just brushed aside and not taken notice of, we will end up in a very, very much worse position than we are at the moment. I'd very much like to know about the level of expertise and experience contained within this council around the paper that we're being asked to scrutinise this evening. And I haven't heard anything about that.
Okay.
And it is our job, Chair, if I may say, to not just to look at overview, but it is to scrutinise these issues before they go forward and they go into cabinet and so on. And if we don't do that thoroughly, then we are failing in our duty. And I'm asking questions, a whole host of questions, to which we need to have answers. And if there aren't answers here tonight, that's fine, I'll accept that. But if there aren't, let's reconvene at a time and place with the right people here who can give those answers. Because if we haven't got them, how on earth can many lay people who have no experience of development be expected to make decisions?
Okay.
I have quite a lot of experience, but clearly we all need to understand that to be able to make these huge decisions, and I don't believe that's the case tonight.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Beasley. So I think the specific question there is around expertise and experience to take forward this particular project. So could I ask the leader and/or Amina to address that?
Just from my perspective as the leader, I obviously work with our officers every day on these issues. I have a huge amount of confidence in the team that we've got, both Amina in her role as Director of Investment and Development, and in Glyn as our Chief Operations Officer, and also in Rob and the team, who have done a fantastic job actually bringing this regeneration work in-house and continuing it at a much more appropriate level for our council, in that it's actually now delivering something. We're actually moving forward with a lot of these sites. From my point of view, I feel really confident that we have the people that we do, and I'm always excited to bring a regen paper, because I know that it's going to take us closer to what the end aim is.
Thank you. Amina, was there anything you wanted to add? It's fine if not, just give
Thank
you the
you.
opportunity.
I think there's probably two parts to this. One, the role of Muse is as development manager, so they are effectively our private sector partner, but also bring the expertise. So they'll build the team around planning, cost consultancy, construction, and that's what they've done throughout the contract with us. So that is specifically their role. Within the council, we then have expertise across regeneration, planning, parking, our transport colleagues. It's fundamentally across collaboration, service and team, built up of different professional services and expertise and experience. And actually, I think the strength is in our partnership with Muse. They bring the private sector experience, the investors, we bring the public sector and statutory roles within that. Just the question Councillor Bees asked about Homes England, we're having really good conversation with Homes England at the moment. They are expected to announce a funding pot this week in their spending review, which we think will be a very positive position for us. We're building up a business case. I think actually the expertise in the council is reason why Homes England continue to discuss this with us.
Thank you very much, Amina. Councillor Dow, I think you indicated.
Yeah, it's a strange one for me, this one. I agree with Councillor Beasley. I don't think we know enough. I certainly don't. I am a layperson and I've looked at this paperwork and I just don't really feel comfortable with actually making a decision on the information we've got so far. I mean, one of the questions is about who else has been approached to support this apart from Muse. A question about due diligence. I know we've been partners with them for a while, but all I can think about is Future Places, and it worries me. You know, this is me being very naive and being honest, that actually there's a lot here that I'm not really clear about the units. What kind of units are being planned? Are they going to be holiday homes? Are they going to be family homes? I would like the finances and the structure of this organisation to be looked at by audit and governance. For one thing, I just think there's not enough information for me to make a decision with this at the moment. I'm sorry to say that, but
Okay, thank you, Councillor Dow. Leader, did you want to respond?
Yeah, and you're right. Sorry, I should have probably gone back a little bit to explain what this paper is asking for. So it's asking for us to approve the BDC business plan. So the partnership business plan. The BDC is a joint venture between us as a council and our private sector partner, which is Muse. They have delivered sites in the past via the joint venture, and this is now looking at some of the other sites that they own. And the one that we wanted to focus on in our administration is the Winter Gardens, and actually bringing something to that site for several different reasons. But it's a really key site, I think, for regeneration in our town centre. It's managed through a board which includes members of the council. So we have councillors who are on that board and who are our representatives. We also have representatives from Muse, and then they're supported by officers both within the council but also between the two organisations. And that's why it's that partnership approach. It's looking at how we work together to deliver something on this site. This paper is not asking for anything other than approving the business plan, for confirming the extension of the site option execution date, which allows Muse to then invest a little bit of money into looking what the options are going to be to bring back to council in December. So in December, overview and scrutiny will have more about what could be delivered on site, what the risks are, how we could financially plan for delivery on the site, what the questions are, like Councillor Beasley raised, in terms of where are the risks and where would we cash flow things from, you know, all of those questions. All this paper is doing is giving the okay to Muse to start doing that site option work and bring something back to us. And I just want to emphasise as well, this is at no cost to the council. So we're not expected to put anything in at this stage. So this is risk-free for us from our perspective, but we do want to work in our partnership and make sure that we are facilitating what we can and allowing, giving this very clear recommendation at Cabinet allows Muse to then progress with that additional work. So that's all it's asking. It's not asking for permission to build or anything else. It's purely to get that site development plan created.
Thank you, Leader. I
think.
Okay, I gather that Councillor Jamie Martin who is one of the ward members for Bournemouth Central is here and would like to speak. So I'm going to offer him the opportunity to come forward now and speak to this item. Come forward, please, Councillor Martin.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I was just having a bit of a Teams convo with the Vice Chair, so thanks as well for highlighting me. Essentially, it's just around the development plan, because obviously as the ward councillor, it does cover most of the sites that are in my ward. And so obviously when this was discussed before by the board, felt like a big deal was made about getting this plan brought to scrutiny. So obviously reading the plan, again, as like a lay member, I'm just wondering how much detail there is there in terms of like the coherency going forward. So obviously you decouple a site from the wider Bournemouth arc and you say, you know, we want to focus on this and do this, and it's going to be key within regeneration. So maybe a different sort of angle from looking at just the amount of housing it provides, but what is the you know, what is it setting out for, what regeneration follows from there? Because if you are going to have some sort of master plan, which the obviously the document refers to, but I'm not entirely sure if there is a master plan, or if it's currently actually being used and worked to, and sort of, because it's obviously there's mention made of work being done with future places in the past and haven't been fed into all these different kind of things. I know there's lots of strategies and plans knocking about, but I'm just sort of mindful from, as a ward councillor, in just making sure that the work gets done within this plan, as I keep saying plan, within this the partnership plan, is that actually there is some coherency here. So obviously I know we're not getting into the details about the site itself and that be a site development plan, but obviously if that is the first thing and that is the big thing, and there's lots of other items which are said as low priority, but they're low priority because it needs to feed into the master plan, and the master plan needs to sort of pick out where next kind of thing, then obviously it feels like there does need to be a little bit more detail there, because you don't want to go all in on one big site and then say, oh, this sets what we're doing. And if the partnership plan doesn't actually set out what it is that the regeneration side of it, not just the providing houses and homes, but actual what does the regeneration side of it set out, and what we're actually looking for Bournemouth Town Centre to be, then I think that detail's lacking here. So that's just what I wanted to highlight, really.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Martin. Yeah, I think there's an interesting points in there and some questions around the sort of broader vision for Bournemouth Town Centre and how this fits into that. So, Leader or Amina or both, again, would either of you like to respond?
Thank you. I think that's a really interesting conversation. It does speak to that wider sense of what regeneration plans there are. And I think this kind of comes back to one of the reasons why we didn't want to continue with Future Places as an administration, was because the remit became too broad, to the point where they were looking at more than 20 sites at some points, and trying to identify ways in which to develop them all. When we took over, we slimmed that down to 3 sites, one of which then was decoupled between the BIC and the Winter Gardens. And really, we took the approach that rather than doing lots of work and trying to bring something out of it over a very long period of time, we wanted to get 3 sites delivered, and then each time one got dealt with, we would then move on to the next. Basically just managing the sheer volume of work, and also making sure that we were actually delivering, because I think that was the criticism of Future Places, that we really struggled to get that delivery through. When it comes to a wider master plan, I think something we've been talking about is potentially looking at almost town master plans, potentially a way in which we can look at some of these regeneration sites. I would say though that for us, this comes down to addressing our needs, and for me and for my administration, one of the biggest needs in our area is housing, and if we can get that site redeveloped with a housing-led regeneration scheme to help deliver the homes that we desperately need within our community, then that's a win for us. What I would rather not do is spend too long trying to perfect something that is, incredibly multi-use and actually quite risky. I think that the housing is what's going to give the stability to this project to be able to develop the other parts and create something other than create more mixed use. So hopefully when we finally get those costings in December from Muse, we'll have a bit more of an idea of what is deliverable on site. But for me, the priority has to be housing, because that's the kind of bread and butter of what we want to deliver.
Thank you, Vida. Amina, did you want to come in as well?
Thank you. I was just going to add, there is a town centre vision which is from 2013. So we recognise that that needs to be updated, and that we need to look at it less as a transactional site, but actually in terms of placemaking. And as the leader has described, that doesn't necessarily need to be a master plan. It's about what achieves those key outcomes and really sets a vision for the Bournemouth Town Centre, particularly the Bournemouth Arc. So that's part of the conversation we're having with Muse in terms of their role in developing that, but also the kind of wider planning context. So it's actually something we recognise, that it's not just about the site, but it's about what the benefits of delivering homes in that location can mean for improving the wider area. Can I just come back to the council's question about BDC? So Bournemouth Development Company has been established since 2011. And every 5 years there's a business plan which essentially sets the strategic direction of the company, which is 50% council and 50% Muse, who are development partner through Morgan Sindall. Got 2 of the BDC council representatives here in case they wanted to comment at all. I think it functions really well. There's really good oversight. There's monthly meetings with members, there's monthly meetings with Muse. There's a good governance, and also hopefully members will agree, we consult members throughout the process in terms of what we're proposing, and particularly as members, they are part of the company. So this is really about re-establishing that business plan. We haven't had a business plan since 2021. So this is about bringing back to ONS and Cabinet the strategic direction of where we believe we need to get to BDC. I would just like to say it's a really good time to do this as well. Councillor Beasley mentioned Homes England. Homes England have got a new programme coming out hopefully this week. They've already started conversations. They're expecting a proper launch in September. The timing of this scheme is absolutely critical. If we miss that window, i.e. if the business plan and the scheme and in December don't go through, we don't have a clear funding strategy, then that window for funding will be more challenging. We've got clear direction from government in terms of the housing numbers which we need to meet, which means that all sites need to be looked at and optimised, or a revisit of how those sites are used and making sure that we're really maximising. So we've got some really challenging complexities around the sites that we're bringing forward, but I feel there's a regeneration plan in place, which is about bringing together all those different parts of the council, and there's that scrutiny with members all the way through.
Thank you very much, Amina, and thank you, Councillor Martin. I had an indication from Councillor Trent and then Councillor Howell, so we'll go in that order. Councillor Trent.
Thank you, Chair. This is an area which I'm you know, quite frankly, I'm completely out of my depth with it, and you know, I sort of feel unqualified to say much on it. But a bit earlier on, we heard that this was at no cost or no risk to the council. So I'm trying to kind of equate that with page 43, where there's a table that says potentially payable BCP, initial feasibility and timescales July 2025, 500k. And that kind of confuses me. That kind of knocks me sort of completely off straight away, because if it's not costing anything, you know, BCP anything, why is this £500,000 sort of appearing in the table? So perhaps someone can explain that to me, and perhaps help myself and other people who may be looking at this from outside, thinking, what on earth is this about?
Leader.
Thank you. Just to come back to the recommendations in the paper, there is no implications of cost to the council in doing those recommendations, and the 500,000 there is relevant to the BDC business plan, which Amina's going to tell me a little bit more about in a moment. But this is for this recommendation and the recommendations in this paper, we're looking at the progression of the Winter Garden scheme, where Muse will be putting in their own money to take it to the next stage, which is that site development plan. So Amina, if you could explain more, that'd be great.
So the Cabinet report that you have in front of you, it doesn't require any financial decisions at this stage. The December site development plan is where there will be a funding strategy which may include a provision that the council will need to make. However, we set out in the paper and the business plan that we are looking at alternative ways of delivering the scheme, which might mean there is no financial pressure or implication on the council. So this current report and the business plan as drafted and presented today is not asking for the council to commit any funding, and therefore any financial implications arising from it are very limited in terms of this business plan. Going forward, when Muse come back in December to Cabinet, the site development plan for Winter Gardens, that will set out what the costs of that redevelopment are, what the funding strategy is for that, so whether they've got any forward funders, any housing associations, any external grant funding, and therefore what our contribution might be to that. So that will then consider the full financial implications in the next Cabinet report. The business plan essentially sets out the status for each of those sites in the current options agreement and proposes what might come forward on those sites. But again, by approving it and the Cabinet report subsequent to Cabinet, there are no financial implications at this stage. And that's what we're saying, it's limited risk and limited.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Howell, would you like to come forward and make a contribution? Thank you.
Thank you. It's been mentioned, but presumably I have to declare that I have an interest as being a board member of the BDC LLP. I just want to slightly correct something the leader said when she said that the next stage would be risk-free. If the project fails at this stage, as I understand it, the costs that are incurred by BDC in developing the next stage will be added to essentially become a debt, which ultimately would reduce the profit of the council in relation to future successful schemes. So it's still really important that we operate and scrutinise what happens in BDC. And unfortunately, I mean, my experience as leading regeneration in various roles in the past has shown me that very few councillors take an active interest in regeneration issues, and often those that do struggle to get to grips with it because it is very complex, involving a lot of paperwork, and we're operating in an area which is beyond the experience of most councillors, and involving millions and millions of pounds. and therefore it's just really important that we have the systems in place and officers in place to make sure that we can deliver that. And we have good officers in place, but we also have a lot of stress on our system, as we all know, into systems in this council. And what I would say is, we are dealing with an awful lot of money, and we have to make sure that we are very focused if we're going to make this work, because BDC has not delivered anything in recent years. We're dealing with a partner who is a different partner from the partners that we originally had in the partnership. That different partner has slightly different objectives and ways of working. It's also changed some of its key members at the board level at which we operate. And therefore, we want this to work. I think, I get the impression that cross-party, everybody wants this to work, but we need to look at this and keep, not take our eye off the ball, basically. Thank you.
Councillor Howell, was there anything anybody wanted to come back on around that? Amina?
No, I was just to mention, Councillor Howell raises a good point. In terms of the scheme doesn't proceed, there's historical debt associated with the scheme, which is, predates, I think, from 2011, maybe earlier. So that's the cost that might crystallise if the scheme doesn't go forward as a viable deliverable scheme. It's not current costs associated with this report.
Okay, thank you. I'm now seeing Councillor Dawton-Gibson and Councillor Beasley. So Councillor Dawton-Gibson, I saw just first. Sorry.
Thank you kindly. I too, of course, am a BDC board rep for the council. I was from 2012 to 2019 as well. So I did it in the time we built Berry Court and most of the other projects. I've been involved in all of those. We are indeed in a very different scenario. I think the first thing tonight that we should almost be celebrating, of course, is the fact that we now have a partnership business plan. I mean, it's the very basis of everything else we do, that as a council and as our private sector partner, we agree what are we going to do and try and move forward. As Councillor Howell has just pointed out, it's a little bit technical because the way it basically works is that the private sector partner shells out the money for the work between now and December, where they're talking a few £100,000. But if it all goes down, then that becomes a debt of the LLP. So there's no cash loss, but effectively there is a liability in the LLP that would diminish future profits at least. So I think that is important to be transparent on. But what I would say to counter that is that the other half of that money, roughly £150,000, Muse have to pay. And I would suggest, as was alluded to a moment ago by Amina, they are, of course, are the professionals. They do this for a living, and they would not be doing this if they didn't think there was a realistic prospect of it working. They don't want to lose £150,000 either. So in a sense, I think there's an element in which they feel there's a realistic chance that they can put together a scheme. I completely understand the comment about 500 units. That's a ballpark figure. I wouldn't latch onto it, but it's a lot more than we had before, just over 300. But as the leader explained, the extra podiums from the car parking being taken out gives you more space. But I think that's quite important. And one of the things that probably poor old Amina will be blessed if I don't say it again, and that is that this is not all about making money for the council. We all know we've got a 3,000 a year, space for housing. Well, this is 1/6 of 1 year's. Well, that shows you what a big target the 3,000 is, but it is also a helpful move in the right direction. I suspect that if this scheme is going to work, it's quite possible we may well have, we'll have to have social housing involved. So how many of us wouldn't want more social housing, get more people up? To me, for BDC and the council, this is not about money making. We need to look at the wider objectives. there are 4 objectives listed for BDC, and the 4th, the last one on the list, is the profit. You know, placemaking and all those things, because actually that's what's more important for the council. If it was about making money, we could just sell the site. But we've tried that in the past, and you sell the site and nothing gets built on it. As indeed the leader commented the other day in another meeting, you know, we have 8,000 planning consents waiting to be built. You know, it's not about getting planning permission, it's about getting people to actually build something. And that is the very reason BDC was brought into existence. Because the minute we sell it, we lose control, whether anybody builds on it or not. They might build on it this year, they might build on it next year. Somebody overpays for it, so they want to wait until the planning changes and they can build another 100 units to make their margins back and things. We lose control. If we do these things through BDC, we can control the style more. That happened here with the one up in Westcliff, the last one we did up on the car park there. You know, suggested it, council weren't happy. In fact, BDC appealed against the planning decision of this council and won. But at the end of the day, the council still has the control, because until the council say, yes, we're happy to build it, nothing gets done. So I think it's very important you understand that process, because, you know, even if we agree to this bit, which is like a scoping exercise, you know, they'll go out, they'll say, we'll get 500 units. What would they be worth? What will it cost us to build? Okay, that's the sort of ballpark figure. Then it'll come back in December and you'll make another decision. So it'll keep coming back to you, and this is only that very first light touch. But I think it is, and I suppose, you know, I feel, and I've done it before when I was with Bournemouth Council. You know, I actually ran a session to try and explain to members how BDC work, because they don't understand it. And if you don't understand it, it's a pretty complicated beast, I'm afraid. So rest assured, this is not signing off building 500 homes. This is just that first step of allowing Muse to go out and investigate. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Dalton-Gibson. Councillor Beasley.
Thank you very much indeed, Chair. I just wanted to make a couple of further observations, if I, if I may. And I think I mentioned at the beginning that I had written quite a long piece around the Winter Gardens in particular, but Bournemouth Development Company in general, which I'd be very happy to circulate to members of this board. Not least because I go back to before the BDC was founded in terms of why we wanted to do it in the first place. And I think it'd be quite instructive for members to actually read it. I would then build on that, and I think Councillor Dalton-Gibson was alluding to this. I would build on that through some proper sessions for councillors across the piece, so they get a decent understanding of it. Because when we set up the BDC, we went through a very expanded process, including European procurement and all the rest of it. And we took members on that journey every step of the way. So they not only understood, but they were supportive of what was trying to be achieved. That needs to be done again. And it's not a political process, anything but. It is about actually understanding what this is about and how it is achieved. Because the setup of BDC and what informed it through the town centre vision was pretty much unique at the time. And it is important that members understand that long-term nature of what we are committed to do and how successful or not it has been at various stages. So in that period up to 2019, effective development delivery accounted for 6 sites, 6 major pieces of redevelopment. Since the start of Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole Council, there has been no new start made on anything within the option agreement. Nothing at all. And I think that is to be deeply regretted. And I'm pleased to hear the words around the delivery plan and all the rest of it. But it's taken far too many years for that revision to occur. And it is only now happening. And it should have happened quite a long time ago. Again, it's not a political point. You'll rarely hear me make political points per se, because this should be removed from there. And the essence of all of this was around getting comprehensive redevelopment within Bournemouth Town Centre rather than the piecemeal development that we'd experienced up to that point, which gradually just tipped over the edge. And it was successful. But it does need members to understand it. I'm happy to distribute that, and I'm happy to be part of trying to help to educate everybody as to why we are where we are and where we were intending to be.
Thank you, Councillor Beasley. I saw the leader indicate that she would like to come in.
Thank you, and I would recommend that as well, because Councillor Beasley has a really comprehensive history on this, which was really useful actually in understanding the background and what the purpose was of this. And one of the things that I've particularly learned since stepping into this regeneration space, which is a role I take really seriously, you know, these are big projects, huge amounts of money, and they've got the ability to really change people's lives in terms of delivering better housing and also creating jobs and the economics, and actually delivering for our town centre by having people live there. I think these are really positive things to be involved with. But I did just want to touch on maybe some of the reasons why delivery over the last 5 years has been really difficult, and I don't think it's entirely down to the setup of the JV. I don't think it's anything to do with those councillors who have been involved. I think maybe there was a level of distraction in terms of future places. But the reality is that we had a pandemic. We had costs going through the roof. We've had threats from the United States in terms of economic instability. We've also still suffering the effects of Brexit. We've had all sorts of different global events, particularly in terms of conflict, like in Ukraine, which have led to a real downturn in the market. And the thing that I hear every time I go to conferences or speak to people within the industry is that now is a really challenging time, and the last 5 years have been really challenging for the construction and for the construction industry and for actually bringing forward and delivering sites, because it's the viability of sites that means something gets built or something doesn't get built, and we're seeing less and less get built. And that's why my challenge to government, you know, we have 8,000 homes in our planning system already with approval. They're not getting not built because someone doesn't want to, it's because they are not viable. And that's where we need the support of government to deliver some of these schemes. And I hope that they would feel quite aligned to something like this. I think it actually ticks a lot of the boxes in terms of what the government want to deliver as well. But just coming back to Councillor Beasley's point about this partnership with Muse, and I say this as the portfolio holder, I'm not a board member of BDC, but I have really come to value the fact that we have a joint venture in place. Speaking to colleagues in other councils, joint ventures will take between 18 months to 2, maybe 3 years to actually just get in place because of the legal implications around it. And I think we're actually incredibly lucky that councillors like Councillor Beasley took that long-term approach in creating a joint venture like this, which still survives, you know, after so many years, it still survives. And actually, I think it can still deliver what we need it to, despite a lot of the challenges we have within the market. And that's not least because Muse are actually really good partners. They have a relationship with Homes England, they're working with government, Legal General, various other partners on other projects. And actually, when you take what they're able to achieve, and then you take what our ambition is as a council, then we're actually still a really well functioning partnership. And I'm just hoping now that obviously there's still challenging times ahead. We're all awaiting the spending review next week, but actually things are in a really good position to be able to attract funding from government. We also have the ambition within the cabinet to get behind this, and I think we have it across the council. You know, people have an appetite to deliver the homes that we need. So I think we are in a really good position, and that's not just down to this administration, but it's actually that history. And Councillor Beasley's email on the top here is really interesting, so I would encourage members to read that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Leader. Councillor Aikenhead, you've been waiting very patiently. Go ahead.
Thank you. So I do understand that some of us may not feel totally comfortable that we understand all of the background to this, and may feel that we're you know, because as I said, things like future places happened and didn't deliver anything either. We may feel a little bit worried about the situation. I think that's very understandable. But this item was brought to us previously in this committee, and I mean, not all the same people, but mostly. And we looked at it and we decided that what we wanted was to see a business plan from BDC, and we asked for that, and they brought us back a business plan. And I've read the business plan, and from even without knowing a lot of background, I can see that a lot of good work has gone into that. And I haven't really heard anything from anyone tonight that is any reason why we would object to that business plan. Only maybe just the one comment from Councillor Martin that there is a wider vision to be made for Bournemouth. But I don't see any reason that we should delay doing this any further. And I think maybe if we do delay it, we're perhaps giving ourselves more problems. So I would like to move that we agree with the recommendations, but I'd just like to, from the debate, add another couple of things in, as well as agreeing to the recommendations. One is that I'd like to put something in that we would really like to see some sort of vision for Bournemouth and even the other town centres. What is our regeneration vision? And if that's something officers are already working on, then that's great. We could look forward to seeing that when it comes to us, because I think that is really important and a really important point. And also on the matter of the background of BDC, and also perhaps more generally on the issue of regeneration, I think it is so important that maybe we should take up that idea that Councillor Beasley suggested, that we should have a bit more education on this. And I wonder if maybe, at least for a start, one thing we could do is allocate one of our briefing sessions, perhaps, to having something on regeneration. So maybe that's something we can think about doing. So that's my my proposal. If anyone likes to second it.
Okay, and see Councillor Waite seconding that proposal. Thank you, Councillor Aikenhead. So I just wanted to speak on this a little bit, if I may. I haven't asked yet. First thing I wanted to say was that the first thing that struck me was how clear and informative this report was, particularly in terms of the history of the Winter Garden site in particular. It's been spoken about a few times tonight that people have varying levels of knowledge and understanding around BDC, but around this site and around the history of it, we all have been serving councillors for different amounts of time, and we all have different backgrounds when it comes to regeneration. So there is a real variance in our expertise. But I did find it a very helpful report, which made it easy for me to follow what we're being asked to do. I think, again, it's been discussed quite a lot already that we're not signing off on any detailed plans around a particular scheme, but we are what's coming to Cabinet is allowing that detail to be brought forward and developed. And my instinct is that we should, as a council, we should be looking really very favourably on schemes that come through BDC that bring forward new housing, especially in the context of us having sadly had our local plan rejected, and the very real fears that I think many of us have about what that means for the quality of development that's going to come forward across Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole over the next few years. This is an opportunity for a major housing scheme that we as a council are going to be able to at least have a greater level of oversight of all the way through. Affordable housing, genuinely affordable housing has been mentioned, social housing has been mentioned. And I think those are all reasons why we should be welcoming the opportunity to develop this proposal, which I believe these recommendations do. I think most of else of what I wanted to say has been covered very well by other people, so I won't go on. But I'm very happy to support what Councillor Aikenhead said as well. So if there are any other final comments or that the committee, that the board have, otherwise I think maybe we can go to a vote on those recommendations, so that the board supports the recommendations in the report, plus the two additional points that Councillor Aikenhead made. Can I see a show of hands, those in favour, please?
That's unanimous.
Lovely. Thank you very much, everybody, and thank you very much, Leader and Amina, for your time. Thank you. Okay, it's 8:30, so I'm going to suggest we take a 5-minute comfort break at this point. So if we can return at, sorry, if we can return at 8:35, we'll pause the live stream 5 minutes. Okay, thank you. Thank you, members, and welcome back to this session of the Overview and Scrutiny Board. We are turning now to item 9 on the agenda, which is a presentation from Leisure Services. There's no written report attached to this item. This is a presentation and a discussion for us to have afterwards. We have Dan Stone here, who is the Leisure Partnership and Development Manager, and we return to Amanda Barry and Helen Wildman, who've waited very patiently through the last item to still be here now. And Councillor Herritt is going to introduce this for us. Thank you, Councillor Herritt.
Yeah, bit quicker this time, maybe. We're, in terms of me anyway, we're at an early stage of the long-term strategy around leisure, and there's actually quite a lot of stuff that can affect that provision going on. We've got changes in the local plan, pitch, leisure. Obviously, we've spoken a lot about lack of funding in local authorities at the moment and how that's going to be affected going forwards. But Dan's going to take us through a lot of that. We'll go through golf sites, tennis, bowling, and a myriad of other provisions. That is, it was a bit of an experience as we started on. Well, certainly for me as a new portfolio holder last year, started unfolding bits and finding that these things existed in the leisure portfolio. So, without further ado, I'll hand over to Dan and he'll go for it.
Thank you, Councillor Herritt. Thank you, Chair. So I'm just going to share the presentation. Okay. Thanks for having me here today. My name's Dan Stone. I'm the Leisure Partnership and Development Manager for the Council. I'm going to be presenting an overview of the leisure services and facilities. So to start, we have 10 leisure centres that the Council owns across Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole. There are 4 in Poole, 5 in Bournemouth and 1 in Christchurch. We have the BCP Leisure in-house management model, which includes Ashdown, Poole Dolphin, Rossmore Leisure Centre, Two Rivers Meet Leisure Centre and the Kings Park Leisure and Learning Centre. The Poole sites came in-house in October 2024. The Kings Park Leisure and Learning Centre has transformed from an indoor bowl centre to a multi-use community centre with a soft play cafe and a new sports hall. This was a £450,000 investment via the Boscombe Towns and UK SPF funding to the tail end of last year. Rossmore and Ashdown are both dual use facilities with the associated schools. The Rossmore facility hosts the new £1.2 million 3G pitch, which opened last year. And it also hosts the Poole Gymnastics and Trampoline Centre, which boasts a gold medalist from the last Olympics. And we have 10 of our participants representing Great Britain in the World Games this year. So just looking at some of the data for the BCP leisure model, you can see on the slide there we have fitness memberships, the Learn to Swim programme, annual footfall and the capital investment programme over the last 12 months. Unfortunately, many subscriptions came to an end just before we took the Poole sites back in-house in October last year. So we spent the first few months just trying to rebase that membership across those sites. This year, the membership sales have been very strong and they remain consistent. Membership attrition has improved by 5% over the last 6 months, and the capital investment into the Rossmore and Ashdown gyms has proved very successful. Pleased to confirm that the new soft play and sports hall at Kings Park Leisure and Learning Centre has had a very strong start since it opened officially on the 7th of April this year, welcoming 11,000 new customers over the first 2 months. So moving on to the BH Live Active contract. This is an external contract and it has 10 years remaining. It includes the Littledown, Pelhams and Stokewood leisure centres. It also includes the BIC and Pavilion, which are out of scope for this presentation as we're focusing on leisure. We have regular partnership meetings with the operator, and the contract includes maintenance obligations on building infrastructure from the council. So looking at some of the data from the BH Live contract, as you can see, the facilities are performing very well. We have reinvestment into the facilities over the last 12 months, includes changing room refurbishments at Stokewood and Littledown, and a 3G pitch replacement at the Pelhams facility. Moving on to the Junction Sports and Leisure Centre in Broadstone, which is contracted out to the YMCA and it has 43 years remaining on that contract. This is different to the BH Live contract in the sense that it's a full maintenance and management long-term lease arrangement. We have annual meetings with the tenant, and the capital investment programme over the last 12 months has included pool covers, sports hall refurbishment and new fitness equipment. We also have the club at Merritt Park, which is a private facility. It's a members-only gym, but it also manages the golf course there. And this is managed by the club company, and there is 75 years remaining on that contract. The capital investment from the club company over the last 12 months includes gym and cafe refurbishment and improvements to the golf course. So moving on to the leisure centre review timeline. The long-term strategic vision is for us to harmonise the approach across all of our BCP leisure centres. A decision was taken back in 2023 for the interim measure to bring the pool sites in-house at the end of the contract. The key milestones in relation to the timeline, or the next key milestone, is April 2026, when we will be looking at reviewing and appraising the future management options of the centres. This will allow us around 18 months to 24 months for the new in-house leisure model, give it sufficient time to demonstrate its effectiveness before we conduct a balanced options appraisal. We are suggesting that we bring a report back to Overview and Scrutiny towards the end of this year or the early part of next year to engage with the board on the scoping arrangements for the options appraisal. So moving on to golf courses across the BCP area. The council owns 4 golf courses. That's Queen's Park, Iford Golf Centre, Solent Meads Golf Centre and Merritt Park Golf Course. The Queen's Park Golf Course is managed in-house. The membership has remained consistent over the last 12 months and they have recently introduced practice nets. They will be hosting a golf festival in July this year. So looking at the other golf arrangements, all the other 3 facilities are under external contracts. So Solent Meads has 1 year remaining. We are looking at the options for that site and location currently. The Iford Golf Centre has an external contract for the next 75 years, and as does the Merritt Park Golf Course. As explained, it's linked to the fitness service at Merrick as well, 75-year contract. So moving on to our BCP-owned tennis courts. We have 16 tennis sites across BCP, most of which, as you can see from that map, are in the Bournemouth area. They're all run on various lease and licence arrangements. We also have some that are free public access, and we run the Pool Park and Branksome offer in-house through BCP Leisure. The BCP Leisure Tennis Scheme has over 1,000 members. The court bookings over the last 12 months around 24,000, and we've invested £65,000 in new floodlights at the Pool Park facility over the last 12 months, and we are looking at resurfacing that facility this financial year as well. It's also worth noting that the Branksome Tennis facility is a multiple award-winning facility with a lot of positive publicity both regionally and nationally. And finally, the council owns an additional 48 sport and recreational facilities. These consist of indoor and outdoor bowls facilities, water sports centres, football pavilions, We also have BMX tracks, as you can see, it's quite an extensive list. We manage these under various lease and license arrangements. Most recently, we were able to lease out the Hainsby Head Outdoor Education Centre to a community group under the Community Asset Transfer. So as Rich alluded to, or Councillor Herriot alluded to at the start of the presentation, we have 78 assets across leisure services. And that concludes the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dan. That's really helpful. So I'm going to open it up to members of the board to ask any questions that they might have. Councillor Waite.
Hi, Dan. I'd like to ask, why was the tennis courts at Ashdown Leisure Centre not on the list? Is it because it's run via the leisure centre?
Yeah, so the tennis courts at Ashdown and Rossmore are included in the leisure centre provision rather than the external tennis, because they're also muggers, not just tennis courts. Okay.
When you talk about the harmonisation of leisure centre offers, I remember when BCP Leisure first took over and people were aghast at the hike in prices, and you said that that's sort of recovered and maybe membership numbers have stabilised, and that's great. But is it really the same kind of customer over some of the pool sites versus Two Rivers Meet? I mean, my understanding that they were like a little less cost sensitive and they were willing to pay more for a higher service, whereas my gym buddies, we always just wanted to pay as little as possible. We didn't really care what colour t-shirts the instructors were wearing. Do you know what I mean? So that harmonisation, I'm not sure. Is it not a case of tailoring it to the customers at each of the sites?
So we do market research before we allocate any pricing schemes, and we do have a tiered system for pricing, particularly around fitness memberships, which does benefit the pool sites.
Do we have any other questions? Councillor Dower.
Yeah, just one little question about the tennis court again. I saw Moordown isn't in use. Why is that?
So that is due to the condition of the courts.
Follow-up question. So what are we going to do about that?
I knew that question was coming. So it's under review, like many of the courts, unfortunately. A lot of the schemes do have sinking funds, but because that is a free access facility, it does not. So it would require capital investment, which we would need to consider against other priorities.
Go ahead.
Do we have any estimates on the cost at all to get that fixed?
So we're looking at around £65,000 to resurface the pool facilities, which does have a sinking fund. So that's a rough estimate as to what it would cost for 4 courts.
Okay. Any further? Councillor Goodall. Sorry.
May I ask, do the leaseholders actually also responsible for the catering arrangements, or does it vary from place to place? And there's a follow-up to that, if I may.
It varies from place to place.
I mean, the reason I ask, I'm a season ticket holder. For example, I'm a season ticket holder of Bournemouth, and I go to Queen's Park, as do a lot of supporters. That is entirely irrelevant to the question I'm asking, except that the food is not very good. And I just wondered, well, we're talking about, I think this is quite important in some respects, because we're talking about an obesity crisis. And this is one of the areas that we could actually do something about it. I understand there are different leases, and I don't know why Rich is smiling at me, but if you've got something planned, Rich, I'd be very pleased to hear it. But it's when we organise a leasehold with somebody, I think we could do worse than have a say about what food is served and how it's served, and the nature of the food that's served and who it's served to. But I've no wish to become a nanny state, I hasten to add.
So the club at Queen's Park is run directly by the council.
That's no excuse.
No, well, no. But obviously, you talked about checking which leaseholders we're going to, but we're operating that directly. I think it's only recently kind of come under the control of the event spectrum. It was kind of a bit out on its own, as it were, until fairly recently, and we're working through some options. But our officer there is dedicated to fixing bit, as we've kind of spoken with. It's on a journey to kind of pay its own way, to make sure that we're not subsidising it. Striking that balance will be part of that. It does a really good trade in wakes and pre-football crowd, but football crowd are not renowned for their positive food choices on the whole. I say that as someone who would regularly go to the football. I can't really comment on that.
Tribal.
I think. Well, no, not particularly Bournemouth ahead of others, but but I think just checking that. I'd be happy to hear further feedback, but.
Okay, thank you. And then I had Councillor Waters.
Which are more profitable? Is it the BH Live sports centres or the council run sports centres?
They're completely different management models because the BIC and Pavilion are in the BH Live contract. So whilst we have access to the BH Live accounts, they're not broken down for us to be able to do a direct comparison across the models.
Thank you. No, I was just curious as to when we decided to make the changes to the recent to the centres recently. Was it ever considered to look into giving them to BH Live during that period of time?
We took all options into consideration when we ran the consultation with the external contractor. So with the external consultants, but with whether it's BH Live or any other operator, because of procurement legislation, we weren't able to transfer the assets into that contract.
Chair, do you mind if I one more?
Go ahead.
And the golf course that's got a year left on the lease, what are the plans for it at the moment?
So that doesn't actually sit in our service. It sits in a different service. I'm unable to answer that question today.
I can shed a little bit further light, but actually we're just working through options at the moment, because there's over a year left, a year and a bit. So we're kind of getting to a point where we can kind of deal with that. But as you might imagine, there's a lot of potential. That it's a well-used golf course, but also it's adjacent to Hengistbury Head as well. So some considerations to be made.
Camp Sang has been very successful.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Aikenhead, I think you wanted to come in.
Yeah. Put that on. First of all, I noticed on the slide you had Rockley Water Sports listed on there. I just wondered what the relationship with the council. I just thought they were a private company. And is it just what they do at Poole Park, or are we involved in what they do at Hamworthy as well?
So we have a lease with Rockley at the moment, but that lease is coming to an end, and we are going out to tender for that this year. We hold the lease for the Hamworthy sports facility, water sports facility as well.
Okay, thank you. Second question. I've only got three. Second question. So memberships of the gyms. If people are a member of one, join one of the gyms, can they use the other gyms? And how wide does that go? Presumably, it doesn't go across the different organisations, but is that possible in any of the gyms?
Yes. So with the BCP leisure management model, we have a membership where they can access all 4 of the gyms. And with the BH Live contract, you can access any of the BH Live gyms with their membership as well. But the BH Live and the BCP Leisure are not linked.
Okay, thank you. And my third question, I think, is going to be for Richard, because in Poole we used to have access to leisure cards, and they were stopped, and there was an idea that they were going to come back as part of the residence card, but the residence card then didn't get brought forward, and so that means that people who otherwise would perhaps be using our leisure centres but can't afford to are missing out, whereas people who historically had the card can still do it. So I wanted to ask what's happening about that. Surely we can't keep waiting for the residence card. We need to bring back access to leisure across all of the sites, because it's really important that people who are vulnerable and don't have enough, then affected by the cost of living crisis, it's really important to get them into our leisure centres. Thank you.
So we're still actively working on the residence card. Obviously, as with many things in local authorities, it's slower than anyone would like, but that's also trying to pick out some of the complexities around it. But also part of that is making sure that the access to leisure is not held up by that anymore, and that we are examining that kind of alongside, if that provides any reassurance. But I can't really do timescales at the moment.
Okay, I should be watching carefully to see that some progress is being made on that then. Thank you.
I would expect nothing less.
Okay, thank you. So I also have a couple of questions, if that's okay. So the first one is just to clarify with the tables that you've shown about each site and the column on capital investment in particular, not the ones that we directly manage. Can I just clarify whose capital investment that is? Is it the same in all cases? Is it the council's capital investment, or is it different in each one?
Yeah, so it's a combination. So we have some grant funding across the Boscombe Towns Fund, we have UK SPF funding, BCP sustainability reserves, and some potential borrowing.
Okay, so it's all coming from the council, but from different places. So all that so where we're talking about like the BH Life and the junction and the other ones that are, I think you called it full management and maintenance contracts. They're still receiving capital investment from the council. No, sorry,
no.
I'm just
no. So BH Live will be a combination because of the nature of the arrangement and the responsibilities the council has for the buildings. That will be a combination of capital investment between the council and BH Live. But with the club at Merrick and the YMCA, that is their own investment.
Right, thank you. That's helpful. I wanted to go back to the issue of the tennis courts, if I may. Councillor Dower beat me to it, asking about more down. It's my ward. But there are four in the same boat of being. Oh, hang on, no, maybe that's not. I've got the free public access. You've got. Is it just more down that's not in use? But then you've got them marked as untenanted, so I don't know.
Yeah, so untenanted means that we don't have a leaseholder in place. The council owns them, but they are just the gates are left open for the members of the public to use them.
Okay, so the other three are in use, free to use, but more down is the exception.
They do require investment.
They all require investment, but the others are available to be used, and it's just more down that is not available to be used at the moment. Okay, thank you. That's helped me clear that up as well. Just wanting to ask, you said that it's under review what the future of Moordown and maybe some of those others will be. Is that going to be part of the work that you talked about in terms of bringing back something to us later in the year or the early next year, and then the April 2026 next milestone? Is that going to be part of that piece of work?
No, it isn't. That's out of scope for the leisure centre review.
Okay. Do we have any sort of timescales on looking at?
We do not at the moment, because it's not up there on the priority list, unfortunately, but it's something we can take away and certainly consider looking at and trying to allocate a timeline to it.
Okay, thank you. I'm just aware that we've had some interest in the Moordown site from people asking what's going to happen there. Residents are very interested, but also we've been approached by people interested in bringing that site back into use in different ways. So obviously there is some interest in doing that. This is
Yeah, so
a sad thing to see. So
yeah, so
people
we
want
received the proposals too in service, and we have them for all the sites. So you think there's 16 tennis sites, 78 sites, and we have inquiries about the underutilised ones quite regularly. So we just need to review those options, but we always need to come back to procurement legislation, because somebody says they want a site doesn't mean we can just give it to them. We have to follow legislation. So.
Of course, understood. Thank you. And my final question was, there was a reference to harmonising our approach across all the sites, and I just wondered if that, am I understanding that that means eventually in the future the vision is for all the leisure centres to be managed in the same way, whatever way that might be? Is that, am I correct in my understanding there?
So we need to identify the scope when we go back to the options appraisal, because as we alluded to in the presentation, there are various contract arrangements in place. So, you know, the YMCA has 40 plus years on its contract, so that one's out of scope for us, certainly. Likewise with Merritt Park, but we're aware that BH Live has 10 years left and we have the in-house facilities. So we just need to identify which facilities will be in scope for that review.
Thank you, and that's coming back to us, as you mentioned, for in terms of scope.
Absolutely.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you. I think that's all my questions. Councillor Mackwood, Councillor Herritt, are you indicating you wanted to say something in response that just coming?
It was just to follow up. Actually, we do have kind of 3 good operators in the area, in BH Live, YMCA, and obviously ourselves. I'm from a town in the north-ish of Lincoln, and very recently they just lost all of their leisure centres overnight. They just closed out of nowhere as the operator collapsed. Same operator that was in Southampton. So I think having ones that are operating, fingers crossed, sustainably and responsibly in partnership and on in good terms is a real asset to the area.
Thank you. Councillor Macro? Thank you for pointing that out. Councillor Rice, would you like to come in? Apologies.
Thank you. Yeah, this may be slightly out of scope, but I was wondering whether there's any discussions about increasing, like sort of a collaboration with schools and that type of organisation that has outdoor, well, and sometimes indoor sporting facilities. I'm thinking particularly about football and my personal experience of my daughter having to travel quite far to be able to access football facilities because they haven't been able to book anywhere within sort of the local pool town area. And there's a lot of schools with facilities, but they're not opened up for use overnight. So I was just wondering whether any discussions are ongoing about that.
I certainly think that's quite interesting for us to potentially explore. Slade's Park in my ward, the 3G pitch there is a shared facility between Everyone Active and which is a tenant on the space, the sports pitches at Slade's, not all of it. If you would like to get into how complicated some of the leisure arrangements are. And there's a partnership between them, and with schools being short funded, I'm sure they'd be open to certainly some conversations about how they might be able to kind of make use of their assets a little more. But that might be one to try and leverage through local relationships rather than leisure. But I'm sure we could involve Dan's expertise in that.
Did you want to come in as well, Dan, on that?
Yeah, just to clarify, were you talking about external football pitch hire, 11-a-side, small-sided football? Indoor football.
Yeah, she was sort of 7, 8 at the time, now 10. So yeah, relatively smaller sized pitches, but able to, floodlighting seemed to be an issue, being able to use it during the week in the evenings during the winter time.
Okay, yeah, thank you. So we will certainly take that away and look into it into more detail.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councillor Macro.
Hello, thanks Dan. I'm glad to say this face to face. Positive feedback from a resident in my ward. Due to the refurb at Rossmore, they had to use the pool facilities, which didn't match Rossmore as when they were redone. So that's a good news story for you.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, so positive feedback from that. And very quickly, I don't know if you recall, a good few years back, there was always an initiative, Festival of Sport. Does anyone remember that?
Rings a slight bell.
Yeah. So it was literally a day where all the leisure centres offered activities, and even Rockley down at Pool Park and things like that. Literally, there was sailing and football and tennis and everything. Would there be anything that you would be thinking along the lines of doing a big active fun day type?
Certainly of interest. We would need to look at funding for such an, sounds like an event, and we would need to link with our event colleagues as well. But yeah, certainly something to take away and consider. Happy to talk about it away from the group as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Were there any further comments or questions? Okay, Councillor Waite.
Thank you. Firstly, Dan, I hope that you get promoted very rapidly, because I really like that you answer questions without any kind of waffles. That's brilliant for me. Also, I really agree with Sue's comments about access to leisure, and I wish that Richard was still here, because I really wanted to make this point to him. For me, it's less about oh, Richard, you're here. It's access to leisure. It's less about income for me, because walking is free. I mean, if it was a phased introduction, if it's about money, if it's about you know, starting it small and building it up, I think prioritise disabled people, because that's who can really benefit from the adapted gyms and things that we put a lot of money into in the past. In I know certainly in the pool gyms and swimming pools, and you know, Rossmore were quite big on their disability sports. And yeah, I'd love that to be the first phase of the access to leisure in as soon as possible. Finally, when you were talking about resurfacing, it reminded me that somebody in my ward came and I think they wanted community infrastructure levy, and there was never going to be enough money to do what they wanted out of that pot. But how it was for the pool hockey club, so they've been paying rent over years and years for what they thought was maintenance of the pitch, but it comes to the end of its life, and who's going to pay to redo it? It's not theirs. They can't pay for it, even if they did have the money. They kind of operate on a shoestring. It's more of a community thing than a, you know, elite sport. So you know, how can we help them, and how are you assessing which pitches get a refurb and which don't?
So this is the Ashdown facility, isn't it? Yes. So very aware of the end of life approaching for the surface. We have a few issues there with the outside spaces, to be honest. So we are undertaking a review of all of those areas, and we are looking at commercially focused opportunities alongside the community needs for that area, because it needs to have a commercial focus for us to put a business case against it. Yeah, so that is on the work stream at the moment.
Okay, thank you. Have we reached the end of our questions and comments on this? I think we have. So now this presentation was just for information, and as Dan has mentioned, the intention is to come back to us with a report and a bit more of something with some recommendations in it for us to take a view on later in the year or early next year. We are able to make recommendations if we wish, but I haven't heard anything coming forward particularly so far. Just checking I'm not wrong. So in that case, I think
perhaps we could make
hang on.
about, yeah. Sorry.
Okay. I'm now seeing a couple of people indicate that they may have a recommendation. I will go to Councillor Waite first. No, I'll go to Councillor Aikenhead first.
Sorry. Yes. Yes, I'd like to suggest that we urge the cabinet to put in place an access to leisure equivalent system as soon as possible, recognising that people in pool have have lost this facility. Ideally, I would say, just to kind of to speak to why I think it's good that we should make this recommendation, because this was something that was in pool. It existed. People could get it. People saw the council taking it away. Quite understand that you want to replace it with something else, but it's usually better to have in place the thing you're going to replace it with before you get rid of it. So I think it's really important that as soon as possible we put something in place that replaces the access to leisure scheme that was actually really helpful in pool. I didn't want to make it any more complicated than that. So
just to clarify, your recommendation is specifically around restoring it to the people of Poole, or are we going to include the...
no, certainly it's about replacing the access to leisure system that was in Poole, but extending it across the whole of BCP.
Okay, so we have a...
Levelling up.
We have a recommendation to Cabinet to consider
certainly across the whole
reinstating access to leisure, but across BCP.
Whole of BCP.
Do I have someone seconding that? Yes, I have Councillor Mackrell, Councillor Waite both indicating. So does anyone else have any comments on that proposal? Councillor Herriot, and then okay.
Thank you. May I just add to it that if it is deemed unaffordable to reinstate it as it was, because there are all sorts of things that could make you eligible under the PASS scheme, that a particular priority is given to disabled and low income, as in both, not... Yeah.
Okay, that sounds like an amendment to the recommendation. Would you accept
I'm happy
that,
with
Councillor Aikenhead? And so with particular focus on people with, on a low income or with additional needs. Okay. Councillor Herriot.
Are you saying disabilities disability as a priority?
Yeah, disabilities as a priority. Yeah.
So over low income.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I'm not sure whether it's a good idea to be making too many prescriptions about it at the moment, but I think if we were to just say, to reinstate an access to leisure type scheme across the whole of BCP with particular emphasis on people with disabilities, I would be happy with that as the wording.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. Councillor Herriot, you wanted to respond?
Well, I suggest that we just ask Cabinet and obviously the service to examine the viability of bringing access to leisure back. It's definitely an aspiration of the administration to do that, so I think we're happy to do that. I just wanted to check the process, because obviously this sits outside an actual paper that's going to Cabinet, and whether it just appears on our agenda for next week. Well, there we go.
Well, I think I appear at Cabinet and say it. I think that's the process. Now, did we have another indication about a recommendation, or was it the same one, Councillor Waite? No, it was the same one. I think, okay, good. So unless there's anything further, do we need to have a show of hands? Is there a consensus around that recommendation, or?
Chair, sorry, just before you agree, is the recommendation to look at the viability?
No, the recommendation
suggested, or what you originally suggested?
Yeah, absolutely. The Cabinet may want to look at the viability in order on their route to achieving it, but
yeah, I think that's what's come out of the discussion, and then Cabinet can give us a response to that.
It's up to Cabinet to say if they don't think it's viable
at the time. Okay. All right, and so can I just check? Do we have consensus on that as a recommendation from the board? Great, thank you very much. In that case, I think that concludes the meeting. Thank you all very much for your time. Thank you very much to Dan and to Amanda and to Helen and to Councillor Herriot, and good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.